We didn't
Somehow
know she had a
knowing
name.
that Mavis is the name makes it even better.
Hi, Mavis. You know, Pam Davis has a dog named Mavis.
You told me that was a finger. All right, I'm looking for a Mirabai. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So who are we missing? We're missing Mirabai.
Mirabai and Aaron were out on their night out together.
That's right. So they were coming from Foothills. So good. That gives me a moment to collect my thoughts. So is Channel 8 ready when they show up?
Channel 8 is ready.
Thank you, Ryan. It was good to see you in person.
I know, briefly, but yeah, good to see you early this evening, National Night Out. Thank you for coming out.
I want to say thanks to all staff who coordinated that. That was a delightful outing.
Yep.
Taylor and Pam did a really good job on that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry I'm a minute late, and Mirabai is going to be a little bit later. The National Night Out was so much fun, we just couldn't tear ourselves away.
Okay. Let me look and see. I don't want to start without Mirabai. I was going to see if we can get through some of the announcements and so on. But we will be voting right away to amend the agenda, so I guess we'll just wait a little bit. Is it possible to let people know? I guess there are probably some people on Zoom watching us right now. Is it possible to let Channel 8 know that we are on a bit of a delay and we'll start in maybe 5 minutes?
I'm sure we can let Channel 8 know.
I was just wondering if they could put something up for viewers.
We're checking on that.
Okay, super.
And it's live.
So we are live on Channel 8, Ryan?
Sorry, the notice that we're hanging on for a few minutes is now
Thank
live.
you. Perfect. Awesome.
if y'all got that, but
I had the Ozo coffee version. It was very good.
Sweet, what?
I knew I was taking a risk.
Harry, I think they need to name a flavor after Mavis.
This is what happens when we go out into the world post-COVID.
That's right. Everybody's a bit punchy. So real people. Okay, so I will give nearby until 7:10 and 7:06. And we'll start issues nearby. 7:10.
I'll say this to you. Somebody said I look a lot younger and happier in person. That was a pretty common theme. But the other two were nice in a way.
Maybe you have to smile more at the council meetings.
Yeah, I'll work on that.
I feel like there's a personality in this sort of a situation, like, you know, extrovert, introvert, I don't know what it is. Like, who is able to sit? Maybe try that.
Perfect. Timing. Okay. There she is. Awesome. Okay, welcome everybody. We were just waiting a moment for you to get on. So with that, get going here. Ryan is gently ready to go for us.
Yes, it's ready to go.
Okay, super. Welcome everyone to the Welcome everyone to the August 3rd, 2021 regular meeting of the Boulder City Council. We have a late start tonight because many council members went out to the National Night Out celebrations that were held around town. So thank you very much to staff and all the communities that hosted it. And thank you to the council members who went to those events. With that, we will get started with a few announcements. The first announcement is COVID-19 vaccinations. You can find out more local information on getting your vaccine and sign up for notifications at boco.org/COVID vaccine notify sign up. Second announcement is 2021 mid-year boards and commissions recruitment. We're still seeking volunteers to serve on these following boards and commissions: the Beverage Licensing Authority, the Boulder Junction Access District boards. There are 2 of those: the Downtown Management Commission and the Housing Advisory Board. Please feel free to sign up at the website, which is up, bouldercolorado.gov/government/boards and commissions. It is a great way to serve your community, and we would really love to have your help in making Boulder an even better place. And with that, Alicia, I think we are ready to call the roll.
All right, sir, and good evening, everyone. Councilmember Brockett.
Present.
Friend.
Here.
Joseph.
Present.
Nagel.
Here.
Swetlick.
Here.
Wallach.
Present.
Weaver.
Here.
Yates.
Here.
And Young.
Present.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Our first order of business today is to amend the agenda. Just to clarify, there is no open comment tonight because of our late start as published in the legal agenda. We are also adjusting our agenda to remove item 2A, which is items concerning the CU South annexation. We'll add a new item 2A, which is a motion to call a special council meeting August 10th, which is next week. And we'll add item 7B, which is a review of proposed schedule for items pertaining to CU South. So if I could get a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Anyone opposed to amending the agenda? Seeing none, that motion passes. And back to you, Alicia.
All right, thank you, sir. Our next item on our agenda is the 1A, the declaration concerning the recent events of the Boulder Reservoir, and that'll be presented by Councilmember Yates.
Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, Sam. I've been asked to read a declaration prepared by city staff and signed by the mayor. The declaration is called the Declaration of Support for Constructive Community Engagement Regarding the Boulder Reservoir. The declaration itself is 4 pages long, with the first 3 pages a recitation of facts and the 4th page a statement of principles, as we discussed at our city council meeting on July 20th. Given our late start this evening, I've received the permission of the mayor and city staff to summarize the facts and then to read verbatim the last page statement of principles. So those summary of facts are as follows. The Boulder Reservoir has operated a beach and concession area since the 1950s. Recently, more than 300,000 people have visited the res each year. In 2012, the staff, the Parks and Recreation Department, and the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board prepared and adopted a Boulder Reservoir Master Plan. That plan included, among other things, the construction of a new visitor center that would expand uses and amenities at the res, including a restaurant and a bar, and an event space serving a number of groups. Based on a 2017 concept plan, the new visitor center was built between 2018 and 2020, and the Parks Board and Council approved a lease with a restaurant operator there. But as the new restaurant was preparing to open, a number of reservoir neighbors expressed various concerns about the hours of operation and the service of alcohol. There were a number of meetings between those reservoir neighbors, city staff, the Parks Board, and members of this City Council. A good neighbor commitment was adopted in the spring. However, concerns continued to be raised by reservoir neighbors, resulting in the withdrawal of the restaurant's liquor license application and the cancellation of several nonprofit events scheduled for earlier this summer. Now, that's a summary of the 3-page fact recitation on the declaration. The full declaration was posted on Hotline last Friday. I'll jump ahead to the last page of the declaration with the statement of principles. The Boulder City Council declares as follows. Number 1, the reservoir is an important community asset and is one of the most important park facilities in Boulder and the surrounding region. Number 2, the City Council believes strongly in the mission and vision of enabling greater access of this community asset in a safe and responsible manner. Along those lines, the City Council supports the 2017 concept plan and is incredibly proud of the new Reservoir Visitor Center and its potential to contribute to this vision, including through a restaurant and patio space for gathering community members and visitors to enjoy the reservoir and its beautiful scenery. The City Council supports the democratic and public process through which the concept plan and lease agreement with the restaurant owner was established. Number 3, the City Council supports hosting events at the reservoir that benefit the community in a manner that is safe, responsible, and consistent with local, state, and federal laws. And we are proud of the decades-long legacy of beneficial, safe, and responsible events held at the reservoir. Number 4, the City Council supports the department staff who are incredibly talented and dedicated public servants in their good faith efforts to engage community members and to address and accommodate their concerns. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the City Council have also heard and considered the community's concerns about the new facility in a public forum. The Parks and Recreation Department, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and City Council have taken and continue to take these concerns seriously and are thankful for the outreach. We hope to continue engaging with reservoir neighbors to hear, address, and accommodate their concerns. And finally, number 5, the City Council supports civil discourse and pragmatic engagement. We strongly disapprove of any alleged threats to disrupt public vetted and approved events at the reservoir. And we believe that there are more appropriate and productive ways to express concerns or provide feedback on issues of public concern. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Council members, anyone want to say any words about this? Aaron and then Mark. Aaron?
Yeah, thanks for that, Bob, and really appreciate the Parks Board working on this and putting this together. It's a response. I think pretty much all of us were really disappointed that those nonprofit events were canceled and that there were threatening emails that were received that precipitated that. So it was really unfortunate. I want to mention I had a chance to meet in person with some of the neighbors a few days ago, and while I did hear from them some continued concerns, I also heard from them some real unhappiness about the way things went with the events and being canceled, and they did not agree with their neighbors who were sending the threatening emails. So my hope is that we can come together and engage in that pragmatic and constructive engagement that Bob read about in that declaration, and move forward on a positive path going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Mark?
Yeah, I am supportive of this resolution, and had the recitation of facts been exactly as Bob had stated it, I would be perfectly fine with that as well. The recitation as in full is a little bit problematic to me for the following reasons. The overall tone of it seems to conflate the behavior of one or two extreme people with the activities of the larger body of the community to advocate for a different policy from those which we decided upon. There's a section that reads, despite this outreach and engagement, some neighbors still have concerns about the new facility and events, as if this was somehow improper. If you look at the language of the Declaration of Independence, they have petitioned us for redress of their grievances. We have taken a different posture, which is our right to do so, but there's nothing wrong with what they have done. I am not privy to the more extreme emails that I don't know how many there were, I don't know what their content was. And there's reference in the recitation of facts to their being unverified. I assume they were either sent or not sent, and if they were sent and we have read them, or some portion of us have read them, then it should be verified. And I hope there's not an expectation that once we've decided on a course of action, those who disagree should, cease their efforts and go home. If that were to be our attitude, I think we're going to be in store for a great deal of disappointment. CU South is coming, and I think we'll find that to be this kind of conversation in spades. And it's just unclear to me that we have properly characterized what most of those neighbors, and I have met them as well as my colleague Aaron, are thinking or trying to achieve. But I do, support the text itself of the declaration. I'm just concerned that the background creates a more negative impression of those who disagree with us and continue to advocate for a different approach to these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mirabai?
Thanks, Sam. Sorry, I didn't have the hand raise function at first. So Mark basically just said what I was wanting to say. I really hope that moving forward, we can continue to address the concerns of the neighborhood and keep that open dialogue. And I just want to make sure that that neighborhood knows that, yeah, there was an action of one person that's not verified per se, but that, I do support the neighborhood and hope that the dialogue between them and the city will continue, and that these new efforts that have been put in to protect against sound and keeping the quality of life that they currently have will continue, and just have a well-rounded, open discussion where the parties are heard and felt heard. So that's all I wanted to add in.
Thank you all. And I'll just weigh in here and say that the way that I read this declaration writ large is a request for everyone to keep in mind that there's differing opinions in a community, and that we should all treat each other with respect and everyone's opinions with respect. And when a decision is made, it would be great if we can continue to, those who disagree, continue to do so respectfully and without any kind of implied or overt threats. So I think this really is just a reminder to everyone that decisions are best made and appeals are best made when everyone is doing it in a way that respects differing opinions. So I think that's enough on that subject. We hope to be able to bring this to a resolution that makes the most people the most happy. And with that, back to you, Alicia.
All right, thank you, sir. Next, we have on our agenda, the consent agenda. Item 2A is a consideration of a motion to call a special council meeting on August 10th, 2021 to approve Resolution 1289 and the introduction, first reading in order to publish by title only Ordinance 8483. These items are related to the CU South annexation.
Very good. Thank you, Alicia. And this item is specifically just to call the special meeting for next week. At the meeting next week, there will be first reading of the ordinance related to the CU South annexation, as well as a state required resolution that will announce the date and set the date for the second reading public hearing of the annexation ordinance. So the action that we're taking tonight, it merely calls the special meeting next week. It will be short, and it's anticipated to be short, and before a regularly scheduled study session. And then as far as the details of the schedule for this item, there's some parts we need to talk through. That's under the matters item at the end, where we can discuss what all the dates and so on will be. Mirabai.
So I just want to make sure, Sam, I hear you. I just want to voice back. So voting on this is simply to approve a meeting for next week. It is not approving a first reading. Is that correct?
Correct. This is just to call a meeting for next week. That's correct.
Perfect. That's what I needed. Thank you.
Great. So can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anyone object to the consent agenda? I'm sorry about that. Alicia, you have a note for me. It's a roll call, correct?
Yes, sir. We will start with Councilmember Sweatlick,
Aye.
Wallach,
Aye.
Weaver,
Yes.
Yates,
Alicia, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
thank you, sir. Councilmember Young,
Yes.
Brockett,
Aye.
Joseph,
Aye.
Friend,
Aye.
and Nagel.
Aye.
So the consent agenda passed 8-1 with Councilmember Yates recusing himself.
Very good. And you can take us to the next item as well.
All right, thank you, sir. Next, we have our public hearings. Item 4 on our agenda. Item 4A is the public hearing for the introduction, first reading, public hearing and consideration of a motion to order published by title only, ordinance 8476. This is submitting to the electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. The question of extending the 0.3% sales and use tax for capital improvements for 15 years, with the proceeds thereto to be used for capital improvement projects in the city of Boulder, setting forth the ballot title, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures, and setting forth the related details. And if desired, the second item is the introduction, first reading, public hearing, and consideration of a motion to order published by title only, ordinance 8487, to the electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. The question to authorize the increase of debt of the city to fund capital improvements for 15 years, with the proceeds thereof to be used for capital improvement projects in the city of Boulder as set forth in the ballot, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures and setting forth the related details.
Thank you. And Nuria, before we turn to you for the staff presentation, I see Aaron has his hand up. Aaron?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clarify one thing on that last vote. Alicia, I think you said that it was 8-1, but would it not be 8-0 with Bob recused?
You are totally correct. Thank you, sir. With one vote recused. Thank you.
Thanks, just want to clarify that. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate the correction. Thank you. It's my first recuse, so.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Alicia. And Nuria, over to you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. The next item really has been a big lift and a great cross-departmental work group has been formed, but Cheryl Patelli, our CFO, Joe Wagner in Finance, and Kathy Haddock in the City Attorney's Office are all here to answer any questions, and I'll throw it to them as we kick that conversation off.
Thanks, Nuria. So we have a short presentation tonight. Thanks, Emily, for running the presentation. Next slide. So we have a few slides on the timeline and background that you've seen before. Then we'll get into the ballot language. And finally, Jeff Haley from Parks and Rec is here to answer a question that was brought up at the last meeting regarding the Civic Area Phase 2 project. Next slide. So the timeline, again, we've had a lot of touch points with council during the last 8 months or so in this tax. We've also heard a lot of feedback from our community via the community survey, as well as the nonprofit focus groups that we held back in June and July. And here tonight, we're really focusing on the ballot language and the ballot questions that were included as ordinances in your packets this evening. Next slide. So you've seen this slide several times over the last decade, many different ways to fund our capital needs. Tonight, we're really focusing on the second renewal of the community culture and safety tax. That tax first came to be when the voters approved it in 2014 for 3 years. Then in 2017, they extended for another 4 years. And tonight we are recommending an extension of 15 years for this tax. Next slide. So why 15 years? It really has to do with the unfunded needs of the city. Excluding utilities, we have over $300 million of projects that are currently unfunded, most of which are general fund projects. So as you can see from the pie chart, the majority relate to public safety, but there are a lot of other areas where we do have unfunded projects for the city. These projects of the 312 unfunded have all been identified as essential or important per our budgeting for resilience definitions, and also identified by our current or pending master plans. Next slide. So I talked about the survey. We brought the results back to council on the July 20th meeting. We had a great turnout of almost 2,000 respondents for the survey, and overwhelmingly the responses showed support for a 15-year extension to fund both infrastructure and nonprofit community projects, as well as support for the related $110 million bond measure. Next slide. So we came to council a couple weeks ago to get direction for you that will enable us to draft our ballot questions. And I want to thank Kathy Haddock from the City Attorney's Office for doing that for us tonight. Your direction was a 15-year term for the tax. 90%, or an estimated 180 million of that, is for funding directed towards city capital infrastructure projects. 10%, or an estimated 20 million, of funding directed toward a flexible grant program for for community nonprofits, a related $110 million debt authorization measure. And then you asked that specific projects and project categories be included in the ballot language. Next slide. So looking at the projects for the ballot language, I did get a request from a council member. I thought it was a great request to include the estimated project amounts. Again, I want to reemphasize the word estimated. This is our best guess at this time. And as we've seen in the past, depending on construction inflation and other factors, these may change. But also I want to say that these amounts will not be included in the ballot language. So we have 3 transportation projects in the draft language: maintaining and improving roads and multimodal paths, replacing critically deteriorated signal poles, and replacing Central Avenue Bridge, improvement of Boulder Creek Path, Boulder Civic Area Phase 2, which Jeff will talk about in a couple slides, completing Fire Station 3, relocating or reconstructing Fire Station 2 or 4, purchasing emergency vehicles for Boulder Fire to provide advanced life support, renovating the East Boulder Rec Center, acquiring streetlight systems and converting to LED lights, and then refresh of the Pearl Street Mall. Next slide. Also included in the ballot language are categories. So these are categories that we could spend the remaining funds on. They are transportation system resilience, progress toward climate goals, safe and prepared Boulder, active and healthy Boulder, and then community-focused technology improvements. I do want to note we changed that name once again, and I really think that this new description really is a lot better to describe what we're talking about as it relates to our technology needs for customer-facing programs. Next slide. I want to point out just a few things related to the debt ballot question. The principal amount is 110 million, and the repayment amount shown is 158 million, and that includes both principal and interest. It is a Tabor requirement that we show the repayment amount on the ballot. And we do try to be conservative when we do that. We worked with our financial advisors because we're spanning over 15 years and we don't know what the market will be in, let's say, 5 or 10 years. So we want to be conservative. So we have adequate ability to do debt financing. We assumed a 15-year debt instrument. We also assumed a 5.5% interest rate for taxable bonds and 5% for tax exempt. I will say we assumed about 15% of the debt issue to go toward the nonprofit projects. We wanted to make sure that we were flexible in case there were any bigger projects that came to us early on in the process. And both our debt and our tax extension questions were reviewed by bond counsel and disclosure counsel. They recommended many changes that we made. They also, I want to just point out for transparency's sake, 2 items. One is the terminology of use of up to 10% of tax revenue to fund nonprofit grant pools. The reason why we had to say up to, it certainly does not preclude us from using 10%. It really relates to our debt service coverage ratio and ensuring that we can meet those requirements without limiting our bond capacity to the full 110 million. We also want to point out the nonprofit projects should serve the citizens of Boulder. I think that certainly was the intent, but we wanted to, that language needed to be added in order for us to be able to bond for nonprofit projects. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Haley to start the next slide.
Yeah, good evening, Council. Jeff Haley with Parks and Recreation. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. What I want to do is just provide a little more background information and understanding for City Council related to the Civic Area Phase 2 project that's being discussed, and specifically that area within Central Park. I had the opportunity many years ago as part of a previous CCS tax initiative to manage the project for the Civic Park, which was west of Broadway. And I think we've all seen some of the success that we've had from that project and a lot of the activation enhancement we've seen in the downtown core as a result of that. So this next phase, as we move east of Broadway, is really kind of a continuation extension of that. This area has been commonly referred to as the East Bookend within the Civic Area Master Plan that was completed in 2015. And so the real goal of this is to activate the park more and really move to the east as we look at the areas where we have our farmers market and other activities and events along the 13th Street corridor. This area really provides nice connectivity to Pearl Street Mall. And then as well as you move south and kind of up to the hill and around the CU campus, this is just one more phase or opportunity to connect our visitors, our residents through all this area with transit, events, activities, and a lot of the cultural activities we have along at BMOCA, the Tea House, and other festivals that occur in that area. I just want to be specific that this is a very conceptual cost estimate that was developed. This project would require some final design and more enhanced analysis. You know, we have historic assets in this area. We have floodplain considerations and many other different disciplines that we would need to look at to really refine the final design and the detailed cost. I did want to specify that this project would not relocate the band shell. Some of you may remember in previous discussions and dialogue back during the Civic Area Master Plan in 2015, there was a lot of lively discussion about the band shell. This does not warrant relocation, or we're not proposing relocation of that. And in fact, just to dive into some of the cost, we would like to enhance the band shell, and that's one of the areas we've seen as an improvement opportunity for the park upgrades. So really what this is, again, as you can see in this diagram, really focused on the park and that 13th Street corridor. The costs are outlined here. I won't go through them in detail, but it is improvements that would support the festivals, the farmers market, access, safety, visibility, and just better functionality around the whole East Bookend. And it would also support future opportunities. And those that are familiar with the Civic Area Master Plan, we hope to enhance that whole east bookend with a variety of items you see listed here with access enhancement, perhaps BMOCA enhancements, transit connectivity, as well as that future Canyon Complete Street that's been designed as well. So if you want to move to the next slide, I'll just continue. These are just a few illustrations that also help give City Council just a sense of what the actual infrastructure would result in. So if you consider the improvements you've seen over on the west side of the park near the library and the Canyon Boulevard, this would all, again, provide better functionality for large community gatherings. You can see some of these images that demonstrate, large community dining opportunities and art opportunities and other cultural amenities. So increasing the path, the options, just a better functional space, as well as restrooms, visitor amenities, and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much the gist of the Phase 2 Central Park enhancements. Again, we would look forward to engaging the community and really refining the final design of this space and how this would really move to construction. So I'll turn it back to you, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. And that was the end of our presentation this evening. So you have any questions? We're here to answer them.
Super. Thank you all very much. I see Aaron's hand, and then I'll go after Aaron and other council questions. Now's a good time. Aaron?
Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate all the information. Just one thing in the language, Cheryl, you talked about adding to that about that the bond measures or the nonprofit projects should serve the citizens of Boulder. Can we not change that to residents of Boulder to include our residents who are not citizens of the United States?
Sure, I'll work with, actually, Kathy, you may want to respond. I'm sorry.
That's no problem. I could move buttons. You're absolutely right, and we should have thought of that before. I think that the language is that bond council are used to is still citizens, but we will let them know they need to update that, and we will take care of that. Yes, we'll take care of it. I'm not sure if the word residence is what they'll want to use. The big thing is there's a constitutional prohibition against using public money for private corporations, and we don't want to run afoul of that, but we will get the citizen word out.
Yeah, and whatever the language needs to be, just so long as it's inclusive of all residents of Boulder, that would be much appreciated.
Really good point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And then I'll call on me and then Mary. My question really has to do with the civic area, Phase 2 and the Central Park improvements. I noticed that slide 11, which is the diagram of the park with the dotted lines around it, the atrium building is included in those dotted lines, but I don't see any plans about what will happen with that building. So is it correct to understand that everything that will happen essentially will be west of 13th Street, so that mostly this is about the park area, or is the atrium building included in your thinking for the spend on this money?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that clarification. Generally, yes, everything is west of 13th Street. I would add, we would like to look at 13th Street itself and just how that functions with obviously the market and other festivals that happen there. But to be clear, the atrium building is really not involved in this. This diagram is from some earlier versions where we were looking at options to include basically a public restroom in the atrium, to be specific. At this time, we would likely not focus on that, and it's more in the park. So yeah, that's correct.
Super, great. That's my only question. Mary.
Yeah, I have a question, kind of sort of a follow-up to Aaron's question. And this is for referring specifically to the nonprofit piece of it. Is that correct? Piece of the measure.
Correct.
So if, say, for example, the homeless shelter were to apply for some of this grant money, We know that the homeless shelter serves folks from Boulder, some folks not from Boulder, outside the counties, sometimes outside the state. So I'm wondering how, in that particular case, would this apply, or would that be an issue?
Gerald, do you want me to do that?
Yeah, if you could, Kathy, thank you.
Yeah, the language that we're trying to do is to make sure that we are not violating the constitutional prohibition against loans to private corporations, which arguably can extend to other areas outside of Boulder. The types of things you guys are raising are really helpful, and we will work with bond counsel to get better language, that it's not just the residents directly benefiting, that it is about the community as a whole and how different users coming into the community affect the community. So we'll make sure that we can cover those types of things. I don't know right now exactly what that wording will be.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Mary. Mark.
Question for Kathy. Can you review one more time why bond counsel had that language included of up to 10%?
Yes, and Cheryl, when I mess this up, be ready to do it. And if it matters, I can't turn on my video. I don't know if somebody needs to do something. When we issue bonds, bondholders like to make sure they're going to get repaid. So when we issue bonds, we usually have to have a debt coverage ratio that makes sure we can pay off our bonds 1.25 times or 1.5 times or whatever the debt coverage ratio is that is desired, so that the bondholders for sure get paid. So we may only plan to spend up to 100% of what we issue debt for, but the bondholders want to be paid back, want us to have money available to pay back 100% plus. If we can only bond, if we have to take that 10% out of our 100%, then we'd only be figuring all that on 90% of our total. So 90% of the 110 million. By saying up to, we can figure the bond coverage ratio as if the whole 110 is available. So Cheryl, do you want to fix where I?
No, I think you explained it well. I think the sticking point is the fact that the ratio required could be, 1.25, 1.5 times the expected revenue that we are planning to get. So therefore, in order to bond 110 million, the expected revenue might exceed just the city's 90% portion that we would need to make bond holders feel comfortable with the transaction, if that makes sense.
I have follow-up, Mark.
Yes, please.
So I guess the bottom line question for me is, would that impact the 10%?
It would not impact the 10%. It just relates to our ability to bond for 110. If we were planning to do the entire 110, it would impact our ability, may impact our ability to do that. It would not impact our ability to give 10% for the nonprofits, simply again because they want to ensure that we have more than what we're estimating at the 200 million. So they may want to make sure that we have 250 million worth of coverage in order to do our bond deal. So sorry, I know this is complicated and I might not be explaining it the best.
A couple of other questions, however. We are contemplating the possibility of bonding off the 10%. How is that possible if it has to be some form of reserve for the bond for the 90%?
It doesn't have to be a form of reserve, Mark. It's just the amount that we're saying is available to pay back debt service. since it has to be in excess of the 100%. And Cara, I don't know, Cara Skinner, if you want to save me on this, if there's, if you want to try to explain this, but it's just the language that we use in the measure. It will not affect our ability to give 10% because we know we were very conservative when we came up with 110 million, that the debt service payment needed for 110 million is less than our expected revenue every year within a pretty nice margin. We did not want to overextend what we felt we could pay back, including the 10% going to community projects.
Because, look, I've been a supporter of the 10% level of funding for the community projects, but I want to make sure that we can fulfill that commitment, because I believe it is a commitment. And I want to make sure that we're not going to be doing a bait and switch and saying, it looks like it's only going to be 8%.
And if you're really uncomfortable with using the up to, we can certainly go back to bond counsel. It might, the worst thing that could happen with that is maybe at the end of the day, given where our revenues are at and where the market is at, we might be able to only bond out 100 million. Like it wouldn't be the worst thing to do that, in my opinion. So Kathy, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Just that it would limit the amount of money we would have available if we did want to use bond proceeds.
Okay. The rest of council may have a different view of it. I just think that we should be pretty clear that the 10% is the 10%, and as I said, it's not a bait and switch that we come back and say, well, things have changed, interest rates have changed, the bonding authorities have a different view of it, and well, it's only going to be 6%. So sorry. I don't think that would be an appropriate resolution.
Thank you, Mark. Mary, and then once we're done with questions, then we can go to public hearing. Mary?
Thanks, Sam. So one more question. We received a lot of email from members of the arts community. And I noticed that a lot of those emails were coming from organizations and or individuals who are beneficiaries of the Arts Commission grants. So they're getting grants for events or particular projects, things like that. Are those types of grants strictly the purview of the Arts Commission budget? Or could those also be encompassed in this 10%? So in other words, a lot of those beneficiaries were not capital projects.
So I have Joel here, Wagner. Joel, if you wouldn't mind responding.
Hi, sure. Good evening, Council. Joel Wagner, Tax and Special Projects Manager. And I will ask Kathy to chime in as well if she has any input. And thank you for that question, Mary. So the criteria and the types of grants will really be a policy question that Council will be able to weigh in on if the ballot passes. But since this is a capital grant, or a capital tax, we'd recommend that funding be limited to capital purposes. So general operating support or program grants probably would not be able to be funded out of these funds. And Kathy, do you want to correct me on that if you disagree?
You've got it right.
Okay, great, thank you. And those sorts of non-capital projects items would be covered under the Arts Commission grant making budget.
And I believe Matt Chesansky is here if he wants to talk on that piece. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. Matt Chesansky with the Office of Arts and Culture. And yes, the Arts Grants program that the Boulder Arts Commission administers works with general operating support, project grants, scholarships, and special funds. Specifically not capital grants unless that's a part of operating, in which case it requires a special vote of the Arts Commission to approve it. So it happens very rarely. And so it is one way that funds are distributed, not for capital projects, to arts nonprofits.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. Aaron.
So that prompts an additional question for me about it being capital funding. Would you be able to fund a planning project for a capital project? Let's say an arts group or nonprofit wanted to undertake a capital project, but needed to work out the details of how that would be constituted. Could we give them a grant to do that planning project?
Thank you for that question. So in my experience, a planning grant that would lead to a capital project could be considered a capital related to a capital and eligible for funding. And again, I'll ask Kathy to jump in if she has any other thoughts, especially since we're talking about bonding. Kathy's experience is very valuable with these questions.
Kathy, you're on mute, but if you'd like to weigh in on Joel's pass to you.
If Joel had a specific question in his, I missed it. I think what he covered, it was great. Is there a specific question that you're looking for from me?
No, just what you said, I think is perfect. But okay. The subject was, is it okay to use these funds for capital planning grants as well as capital grants?
Yes, we did make sure that was covered in the language when we talked to bond counsel about it.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, council, any other questions? Seeing none, we will go to the public hearing. We have 12 people signed up for the public hearing on this, so everyone will get 3 minutes apiece. The first 3 speakers will be Susan Prant, Jan Burton, and Lynn Siegel. We'll start with Susan Prant.
Okay. All right, Sue, you're able to.
Okay, unmuted?
Yeah. We can hear you.
Okay, hi, council. My name is Sue Prant. I'm the Director of Community Cycles. And we were a past recipient of one of these grants, and we thank you very much for that. And thank you for bringing this forward again. And just want to point out the great work that was done in the past by Joel and his team and continues to be done in the future. Joel's really a pleasure to work with. Just a few things, and I realized also when Joel was talking, maybe I'm talking a little bit more about implementation, which would come later on. But I would want council or whoever sets the rules on this to make sure that there's enough money left in the nonprofit pool to go for a while, since this is a many-year grant and we could use it up pretty quickly. And in that respect, also on implementation, I think you should be careful with the planning grants and keep them small. I would say that organizations should raise their own money for planning, because that's a good start to get to your capital project, and it's a good practice because raising millions of dollars is not very easy. So it's really important that you know how to do it, and planning grant is a good way to test the waters there. But if you do allow that, make it very small. And also some kind of questions are things like ongoing projects will there be ongoing also for city projects? Like I just was in a discussion with the city about the dirt alleys and how people really complain about them, but there's no money for them. So is that something that, could be applied for down the road, or is it just this list that we're seeing in front of us today for city projects? So those are kind of the details, but a big thumbs up on this. And yes, please remember to keep the 10% for the nonprofits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Next, we have Jan Burton, Lynn Siegel, and Daniel Schur. It looks like Jan Burton isn't showing up here. So Jan, if you can reach out in the chat or the Q&A if you're here, that'll be great. And with that, we'll go to Lynn Siegel. Lynn, you have 3 minutes.
There is absolutely no doubt that we need all of these cultural facilities, the maintenance, all of the infrastructure needs, open space, all of it. We need all of that. The question is, who pays? Not the taxpayers. This should not be put before the voters. This should be put before the developers. They are the ones that need to be paying. May I state, CU South should not even be considered.
Lynn, if you could please keep your comments. Lynn, could you please keep your comments to the subject at hand?
Sales tax revenue. So do not interrupt me, Sam. Okay, CU South is a huge impact on our sales tax revenue. Got it? Huge. And I will not in any way support this being on the ballot at all when you're even dreaming of CU South. Now, let's go elsewhere. Gun Barrel, the Armory, Diagonal Plaza, McKenzie Junction, the Rev, the big, all of the affordable, the affordable housing that makes more unaffordable housing, East Boulder, the Armory, 26th and Pine, condos as far as I can see, 1900 Folsom across from the Chamber of Commerce, the huge development there. This is all costing heavily. Now it's the developers that are developing these places that need to pay for this infrastructure and for this tax revenue, this bond that you're asking me to pay for. No way, no way. Not with the way you're approving one after the other of third stories and all kinds of extra subsidies for all of these developments. No way. Yes, they have a right, a certain right, don't they, Bob and everybody else? Yeah, a certain right, but they also deserve to pay for their impact on the jobs housing imbalance and everything else that this sales tax revenue is having to cover. And you're begging welfare from the taxpayers. Not okay. Not okay. I agree that the nonprofits should have lots of money. I agree that there should be lots of cultural amenities everywhere. I certainly agree to all those things. What I don't agree on is who pays for it. Not me, not the taxpayers. Don't put this thing before the taxpayers. It's your problem, your fault for subsidizing these developers and causing this $3 million charge to the police for the homeless. That's where it comes from. Done.
Thank you, Lynn. And I believe that Jan Burton is now in the meeting with us. So Jan, if you're here, you've got 3 minutes.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jan Burton and I live at 852 11th Street. I am a board member for Create Boulder, an organization which has leveraged other foundations, city dollars, and our own donor contributions to get more than $400,000 in the hands of Boulder-based arts organizations and artists since the great quarantine began. I have 3 points tonight. Number 1, by removing the word culture from the ballot title, you have sent a strong message that arts and culture are not important. Reinserting the word culture in the title would assure Council's commitment to arts and culture in the community and for the upcoming update of your own cultural plan in 2023 and 2024. Number 2, the 2014 and 2017 community culture and safety tax included 20% for nonprofits. This was the intent and the expectation of the arts and nonprofit communities who help generate support for the tax and the community at large. Your plan for an extension has lowered this to 10%. One of the reasons you have given is that there are no shovel-ready projects from nonprofits. I would submit to you that nonprofit organizations don't have planners. Keeping their doors open was their priority during the past year and a half, and they hardly had their eyes on large project or facility development. On the other hand, the city of Boulder has a cadre of planners, incidentally paid for by the community, so it's not surprising that you have a long list of projects. With the new 15-year tax, please give the community a longer runway to develop small and large-scale project opportunities without a bias towards city projects. 20% would be aligned with the original tax intent, but 15% should be the minimum assigned to nonprofits. And number 3, please allow for planning grants so that nonprofits wanting to explore projects have the same capacity as the city of Boulder. On this point, I tend to disagree with Sue Prant. As an alternative, you could assign 20% of your planners to nonprofit project support. In summary, this council has supported arts and culture through general operating support grants and other budgetary items. Please don't step back from arts and nonprofit organizations by limiting this tax measure to its full community potential. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Jan. Next, we have Daniel Scher, Deborah Malden, and Nick Forster. Daniel?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Daniel Scher. I live at 2161 Jonathan Place, just close to Iris, between 26th and Broadway. For 20 years, I served as Dean of the College of Music at CU Boulder, and I had many opportunities to work with our partners in culture. And I'm speaking with you because I share many of the concerns that Jan Burton just enumerated for you. I heard the conversation before I had this opportunity to speak, and there's a lot of talk about how you pay for this and how you pay for that. But I asked the council to step back for a moment and take the larger view that shapes 15 years, which is no small amount of time, wherein not only is culture eliminated from the title, but you also have cut the budget in half and added in not-for-profits that are not necessarily in the arts space. So Boulder has not had a reputation of being supportive of the arts. I'm thinking of a group that tried for years and years to get some sort of approval from the city to annex some property where a performance center that would serve many of the local organizations that so desperately need it with arts facilities, and that fell flat. When you look around the country and you think of Boulder as a destination, you are missing a huge and important sector when you don't attend to arts and culture, which speaks to people who want to move here and are looking at quality of life and who need the community support, not just the university providing its arts and culture, but something that the community has ownership of and that we on campus support. The other thing I would say is that I thought that the council had a deep commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the arts are an incredibly powerful way to include those less fortunate than you and me. So I would ask you to please keep culture in the title and please restore the budget to its original 20% because you're talking 15 years. That's a very long time. And what the arts community has gone through this last year and a half is absolutely devastating, and it's amazing how well they have come through it, but they need this support. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Next, we have Deborah Malden, Nick Forster, and Fran Zankowski. Deborah?
Hello, Council. My name is Deborah Malden, and I live at 502 Mapleton. I was a member of the advocacy team for the initial 2014 Community Culture and Safety Tax and served on the Community Capital Tax Committee for the 2017 ballot. I am here this evening on behalf of Create Boulder. If nothing else, the pandemic has highlighted the importance of arts and culture to us all, both individually and collectively. Despite the devastating impact of the pandemic on the sector, Boulder's many artists and arts organizations continue to create and to serve the needs of the community while working to advance social justice, equity and inclusion, and to increase access to the arts. This tax extension, unlike its predecessors, will not specify a slate of proposed nonprofit projects. To a large extent, this reflects the fact that most organizations have been hard-pressed to pursue capital planning in the past 18 months while they were struggling for their very survival. It also explains why public engagement in this tax extension is relatively late. As you know, the city's community cultural plan will be updated in the early years of the tax. This will allow the city to allocate investments based on rigorous analysis of the arts landscape and our community's aspirations. Undoubtedly, this planning process will identify venue and facility needs fundamental to the community's interest. As a 15-year tax, it is crucial that the city develop processes for future decision-making that are open and transparent and include substantial community input. Much like Boulder's or any city's parks and recreation assets, the arts benefit the whole community and are foundational to Boulder's vibrancy and health. Boulder's arts facilities and their maintenance, however, are supported mainly through private investment. The renewal of this tax provides a unique opportunity for the city to help ensure investment in critical arts infrastructure. It also allows the city to leverage public investment with private support. The past 18 months have confirmed for all of us the fundamental importance of arts and culture to our social, emotional, and economic well-being. I hope the arts will be appropriately supported by council tonight. You can do this by increasing the percentage of funding available for nonprofits to 15 and better yet 20%, ensuring a robust public process for investment decision-making, and preserving the name culture to ensure that the arts are prioritized in future funding decisions. Thank you for your consideration and for your good work on behalf of Boulder.
Thank you, Deborah. Next, we have Nick Forster, Fran Zankowski, and Cindy Sapucha. Nick?
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to staff and to council for your hard work on behalf of our hometown. I know this is not easy. I'm Nick Forster, speaking tonight as an artist, as an arts leader, as a founding member of the Board of Create Boulder. I'm speaking in regards to the first reading of this ordinance and the renewal of the tax. And as you've already heard this evening, the tax was passed with the support and cooperation of the arts community, because there was a clearly defined percentage of funds that were to be allocated for capital projects in support of arts and culture. That commitment was 20%, not up to 10%. And it was a critical component in gaining the trust and support of all of us who worked hard to pass that sales tax that year. So I'm voicing my concern that bond council has an outsized role in driving this agenda and driving and creating this language. I'm concerned that this renewal is for 15 years, which is a long time, and that most importantly, the language ignores the original intent of this tax, that the percentage of revenue for arts and culture is too small. So specifically, I'm just asking you to support 3 changes to the language. First, as you've heard, restore 20% of revenue for arts and culture. I know that's a stretch. I know that's a challenge. I know it doesn't work for your numbers, but I also know that your projections are conservative, that you could bond a smaller amount, that you could honor the commitment to arts and culture that was in the original intent. Yes, if it's 15%, that's a step in the right direction. But I really believe that 20% is the right number, considering the time frame. 15 years is a long time. And again, that was the original intent of it, as it was passed and approved by voters years ago. 10% is, up to 10% is insulting. And it actually constitutes kind of a whole cloth repurposing of the tax. It's not a renewal. It's a complete transformation of the original intention. Second, I agree with people who've said restore the word culture in the title as a commitment and as a reminder that that's an important part of what this is about. And third, I want to concur that planning dollars are important. I can tell you, as somebody who created one of Boulder's most popular cultural facilities in the heart of downtown, and I did it without any support from, or any tax dollars. We spent nearly $1 million in architecture, engineering, design, financing, and for the construction of E-Town Hall, which was an $8 million project. So that planning component is critical for, if you want shovel-ready projects, you have to help arts organizations get to shovel-ready so that they can actually submit for funding. So to review, 20% of funds, if you can get there, really hope you can work hard on that. And not just for non-specific nonprofits. I know it feels like this thing is already done, that the survey suggests everyone will support it, but the arts community is not just artists, it's businesses, it's civic leaders and members of the media. This is not done. The voters have not voted yet. Let's work together to support arts and culture in this tax. Thank you.
You, Nick. Next, we have Fran Zankowski, Cindy Sapucha, and Chip from downtown Boulder. Fran?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to address you all tonight. And I apologize in advance if my comments appear too harsh. And thank you to my fellow Create Boulder board members for their thoughtful and persuasive contribution to tonight's discussion. As a lesser known member of Create Boulder, I am perhaps better known as the publisher of Boulder Weekly. And it is in that capacity I wish to address my concerns about the ballot measures before you. I find it is better to air our concerns and work towards agreement on these issues now than to later hear our complaints and our potential reluctance to endorse this measure when it comes before the voters. It has been and still remains the mission of Boulder Weekly to promote, support, and sponsor many of Boulder's cultural and social nonprofits. It is also my personal mission to be a force for positive social change, which all of these arts and nonprofits achieve in their various programs. I have been leading discussions within Boulder Weekly about this proposed extension of the community culture and safety tax. We have endorsed these previous initiatives, but now we find ourselves seriously conflicted. The removal of culture from the title, the radical 50% reduction of funding to the arts and nonprofits, and to the nearly quadrupling the duration of this tax, while not truly a bait and switch for all practical purposes, this is and seems to be incompatible with the original intent and spirit of the tax. It appears this revision of the tax is actually masquerading as an extension. I have learned tonight the 15-year term is related to bonding capability issues, but even SCFD in 2018 only required extension from the voters. Cutting in half 20% to 10%, the fund allocation to nonprofits causes great unease. Having recently served for the past 5 years on the Boulder County Arts Council, I've become intimately aware of these organizations' facility and venue needs. No one knows what will be needed in the next 10 years, let alone in the next 15. And the removal of culture from the title ignores and repudiates all these organizations do and have done to encourage passage of the first tax and later the previous extension. I encourage you to reinsert culture back into the and to restore the full 20% funding for our arts and nonprofits. And I thank you for your time, your attention, and consideration.
Thank you, Fran. Next, we have Cindy Sapucha, Chip from downtown Boulder, and Kathleen McCormick. Cindy.
Hi, all. Cindy Sapucha here, and I live at 7173 Old Post Road.
I'm gonna basically echo what you've already heard from Jan, Deborah, Daniel, Nick, and Fran. And but I want to start off with a little bit of history. Way back in 2015, after extensive research, hard work by city staff, and many hundreds of hours of input from the community, the City of Boulder Community Cultural Plan was passed unanimously by City Council. And during the research portion of the creation of that plan, it was brought to light that the City of Boulder funds arts and cultural organizations at a fraction of the amount per capita compared to peer cities across the country. One of the goals of the cultural plan was to work on chipping away at that difference. The city has done an admirable job increasing that pool of grant funding for our community's arts organizations. And while funding has increased, it is still a fraction of the funding in peer cities. That, coupled with the fact that Boulder has one of the highest concentrations of creative professionals per capita in the nation, makes it a double whammy. The community, culture, and safety tax helps make up some of that difference. Endless research has been conducted that can attest to the benefits of arts and culture brings to a community. It improves well-being, unifies communities, strengthens the economy, drives tourism and revenue for local business, sparks innovation, and on and on. And I get that the city has unmet financial needs to fund infrastructure projects. Listen, I work for an organization and I'd like to see some of that tax revenue used for popular and necessary public infrastructure projects in downtown, which I fully support, but not at the expense of cutting funding for arts and cultural nonprofits, which has made this tax such an important part of our community and the cultural landscape of Boulder. As a supporter of the arts and a member of the board of directors for the Boulder County Arts Alliance, but even more passionately, a supporter of all things that build our community, I'm asking you not to take a step backward by changing the community culture and safety tax. Maintain the hard work that has been done by past city council members, public and nonprofit administrators. Keep culture in the name, keep the 20% for arts and culture, and let's get this baby passed. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Next, we have Chip and Kathleen McCormick, and we have Michael Parrish signed up. Michael, we do not see you in the meeting, so if you could reach out either over the chat or in Q&A to let us know, that would be great. And with that, we will go to Chip.
Thank you, Mayor Weaver. Good evening, council members and I suppose council members. My name is Chip. I'm the CEO of the Downtown Boulder Partnership, and I want to thank you for carefully considering the language of this really important ballot measure. I know you all are keenly aware of the importance of investing in maintaining the city's buried infrastructure, which this tax will help to a great degree. But I'd also like to just take a moment to advocate specifically for the critical importance of social infrastructure. And borrowing language from sociologist and author Eric Klinenberg, who loosely defines social infrastructure as the physical elements of a community that act as a conduit to bring people together and build social capital. And I certainly don't have enough time to sufficiently elaborate on why investing in these assets that shape our social interactions is increasingly important, but I imagine you all have your own list of arguments. But I will say that there are two projects among the staff recommendations tonight that, among other great physical benefits, fit squarely in the social infrastructure column as well. And that is the Pearl Street Mall refresh and the civic area phase 2's improvements that Jeff Healy outlined in the presentation. So in short, I'd like to thank staff and council for consideration of the inclusion of these two projects in the ballot language. And if I were given a closing argument, if you will, I would just point to the previous successes. One in the transformation experienced as a result of phase 1 of the improvements of the civic area, as well as two, the many calls I receive each month from leaders, city leaders all over the country wanting to learn how their downtowns can be more like our beloved Pearl Street Mall. Again, I think these are very worthy projects, and I also would remind you that these are projects that do have a return on investment as we support these efforts in and around the downtown that just does generate more tax revenue to fund all of these worthy projects. So again, thank you for your consideration, and as always, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Chip. Next, we have Kathleen McCormick, Michael Parrish, and Justin Veach. Kathleen.
Good evening, City Council members, staff, and council. I'm Kathleen McCormick, and I live at 3055 11th Street in Boulder. As chair of the Boulder Arts Commission, I can tell you that we support the strongest measures to provide facilities and spaces that encourage an equitable, diverse, inclusive, welcoming, and vibrant community. Arts and culture are foundational community infrastructure for healing, inspiration, and resilience. As we've seen, challenging year of COVID, strife over racial inequities, and the tragedy at King Soopers. The Arts Commission was concerned to learn that the word culture has not been included in the new title, and that arts and culture have a small and vague piece in this ballot measure, even though Boulder is recognized as one of the top US cities for our size for arts and culture, and our arts organizations draw a national and even international audience, which supports our economic vitality as a city. Please consider some requests to support arts and culture capital infrastructure. First, allocate a larger percentage of the tax revenues, ideally 15%, to arts and culture for the physical facilities and spaces to do their work, just as parks and recreation or other projects mentioned for this ballot measure have requested. Boulder's arts and culture community includes over 160 nonprofit organizations, very few of which own their facilities or can easily access appropriate spaces at affordable rents. With the economic impacts of COVID, we're hearing more about arts organizations that no longer can afford to rent in Boulder, which is a huge loss for our community. Facilities such as Bamoka and the Dairy need room to expand, and many organizations cannot find appropriate venues for classes, rehearsals, exhibits, and maker and office spaces as they are displaced. Arts and culture spaces of all sizes, but especially larger performance and gathering spaces, are critically needed. Please consider allowing grants for smaller facility projects while also aggregating funding in tranches for larger projects that could be distributed every 3 or 5 years. Flexible ballot language is needed to allow for planning grants and small projects with immediate needs, as well as larger grants for facilities that could be shovel-ready down the road. The idea of a cultural arts center, for example, with large and small spaces for performances, community events, and offices has been discussed for decades and explored in concept plans completed for the city as part of the Civic Center West Bookend planning. Some arts and culture leaders believe the time is right to build such a transformational project for downtown Boulder. Arts leaders are discussing public-private partnerships and capital fundraising campaigns for this and other projects that could better serve the whole community. Please also consider how the city will determine which nonprofits should get tax revenue funds. Who will define the process and administer this program? Could the Boulder Arts Commission and Office of Arts and Culture help determine distribution of arts organizations and/or partner with an organization like the Community Foundation for distribution to nonprofits? A fair and equitable process will be critical for these public infrastructure funds. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Kathleen. And then last we have Michael Parrish and Justin Veach. We do not see Michael Parrish in the meeting. Michael, if you could let us know with Q&A and chat if you're here. And with that, we'll turn to Justin.
All righty, can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you, City Council, for your good work and for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Justin Veach. I'm the president of the Boulder County Arts Alliance's Board of Directors. The Boulder County Arts Alliance, of course, acts as a catalyst to incubate, stimulate, and sustain a thriving arts community here in Boulder County. I was first drawn to Boulder from Los Angeles in the 90s to attend Naropa and to study with Allen Ginsberg. I got my first taste of the nonprofit arts sector while working at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, which propelled me to a career in the arts that has spanned 25 years and counting. After 15 years working in Los Angeles for a variety of arts organizations and receiving an MFA from the California Institute of the Arts, I decided to return to Boulder and continue my work in a place that had played such an essential role in my creative and professional development. I have since helped get the Jaipur Literature Festival off the ground as a key volunteer. I worked for the Boulder Public Library organizing author events for a while, spent a glorious 9 months working with Nick Forster and the great people at E-Town, and the last 3.5 years and counting, managing the Longmont Museum's Stewart Auditorium. What I've learned in this time is that the arts in Boulder have been historically undervalued and undersupported, and that the city is in an ideal position to take the lead in supporting the arts and elevating the essential role they play in the life of the city. We've all heard much of the research and metrics demonstrating the extraordinary impact the arts can have upon a community's economy. It's become a standard ingredient for any recipe designed for community revitalization. But the arts and creativity are also an incredible contributor to the overall quality of life for a community. The arts are a means to experience the world through another's eyes. They offer us opportunities for connection, recognition, and understanding. They help foster a healthy respect for difference, which in turn leads to increases in things like, empathy and tolerance. Support for the arts, in other words, is support for the social and cultural fabric of the community, which is why it's so important to keep funding for the arts and culture, a key part of this tax. In line with Create Boulder's and everyone's recommendations this evening, the Boulder County Arts Alliance supports the extension of the 0.3% tax and that its original name, Community Culture and Safety Tax, remain in place so as to demonstrate the city's commitment to the arts. We also support the allocation of the full 20% to arts and cultural organizations for the funding of large-scale investments as well as smaller ones. Thank you for your time and thank you for your good work.
Thank you, Justin. And with that one last call, do we see Michael Parrish in the meeting? All right. Thank you, Ryan. With that, we will bring the public hearing to a close and we will turn to council for discussion and any motions. Give me just one moment here. All right, I see Junie, Aaron, and Mary. Junie.
Yes, I do have a question about the culture point that was made by many of the speakers earlier. I was under the impression from our last council meeting that there was either it would be reinserted.
So I guess that's the staff. Staff, did you have any opinion about what you heard at our last meeting as far as including culture?
I'll defer to staff if they want to weigh in, but I know that we have talked internally a bit and we certainly defer to council, can absolutely place that back in if that is the desire. So we will defer to your discussions.
Super, thank you. Junie, did that answer your question?
Yes, I do support reinserting culture based on everything that I've heard earlier from the speakers. Also, at the last meeting, we did also discuss increasing the amount away from 10% to something closer to either 12 or 15%.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, and then hang on, give me a moment. I apologize. I covered up my, Aaron and then Mary. Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for that, Junie. I would also like to see the word culture added back into the tax name. So it could be community culture, resilience, and safety tax. I think it's not too bad of a mouthful, and I think would be help gain support, and I think show the commitment of the tax measure to supporting cultural and other nonprofit initiatives. And then I wanted to check in with council on the allocations to the nonprofit side of things. I know the last direction given at the last meeting was more on the 10% side, but we've heard some really compelling testimony both in email and at the public hearing tonight. So I'd like to check in again to see if council would consider changing that allocation to 15% for the final here at the public hearing. So we can let other people talk, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts and see if there might potentially be support for that 15% level tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And before I go to the others, I will say I'm planning on doing a straw poll on both the culture and the percentage amount to nonprofits, if that's okay. With that, we've got Mary, Rachel, and Mark. Mary.
Thanks, Sam. So we heard testimony about how the original tax, and I presume that they were referring to the original tax in 2014, had a 20%, because that was the original one, and then that original one was then renewed And that's, so it's been renewed a couple times, and I'm just wondering, if the very first time that it was put to the voters, it had a percentage in there for the arts. And then that's part one of my question. Part two of my question is it a, on a temporary tax like this that is renewed, is there a, requirement that there should be, it should be this for the same thing? So that's my question in two parts.
Great, and I'll turn to staff. Nuria, Cheryl, or Sandra, do one of you have information about the 2014 tax and the renewal? Or I think Mary's second part to your question was, is it required to keep the same allocations during a renewal?
So, and I am going to defer to Joel for further detail on this, but in the 2014, we did not specify a specific percentage in the ballot language. We did, however, include specific projects. So Joel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. Thanks, Cheryl. And good evening again, Council. Cheryl is correct. The original ballot item listed specific projects. So that ballot item, sorry, I was just pulling it up from my notes here. The total projected revenues was 27.6 million. There were two nonprofit projects with that, Boulder Museum, Museum of Boulder and Dairy Center for the Arts. They totaled approximately 28% of that ballot, but it did not specify a percentage. The second round, again, specified specific projects, and the community projects, there were 7.9 million on about $42 million worth of projects, and that was about 19%.
Thank you, Joel. And then I believe the second part of Mary's question had to do with, is it required if you do a renewal of a tax to keep the quote, same allocations?
So I'm hoping Kathy will be able to answer that question, so I'll defer to her.
Can't hear you, Kathy.
Oh, now we can, I think.
Okay, try again. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm having computer problems in case you can't tell. We cannot change the purpose of the tax so that we've got the capital improvements, but in analyzing it, we did have enough private projects in there that were okay. So we did, like Joel said, we did not have specific allocations before. We're not tied to specific allocations or not in this one. We are tied to related purposes.
Very good. Thank you for that. Mary, did that answer your questions?
I believe it did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, we have Rachel and Mark. Rachel?
Are we on questions or just dialoguing?
Full dialogue, up for motions or whatever.
Great. So as to your straw poll on the putting culture back in the title, I would be in the yes, put it back in the title column. And then, on the 10 versus 15 versus 20% of the tax, I guess I feel like my understanding is that the return on investment for dollars that we invest in arts, we get a 2-to-1 return. So I'm a pretty strong proponent of capitalizing on that and supporting the arts where we can. And then I also am hopeful that sort of the infrastructure cavalry will arrive a bit from the federal government and the monies that we are expected, both federal and state level. So I'm inclined to push for the full 20% to go to arts. And hopefully that answers the straw poll. Thanks.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, there was no intent in naming the statute to either cut out the artistic community or frankly to offend them. So I have no difficulty, if we want to call it something along the lines of community resilience, safety, and culture tax. That really wasn't the intent of where we were going. And if it is important to them, I'm more than happy to comply. With respect to the allocations, I remain convinced that it is time for us to be serious about meeting our infrastructure needs. And we've seen the numbers. The numbers are approximately 295 million in unmet infrastructure needs. And when I look at that, I usually lop 100 million off because there are some projects that are simply aspirational. But that still leaves us with $195 million worth of infrastructure projects that we don't have funding for. So this renewal will still only get us, between 50 and 60% of those. And that list is likely to grow over time. It's certainly not going to shrink. And so we're simply not responding to the deficit in capital expenditure funding that we ought to make. It has been my sad experience to actually live in a city where capital expenditures were ignored year after year after year. And the impacts of that are unimaginable in terms of what it does to a city, the loss of economic vitality, and other impacts. And so I remain convinced that the 90-10 is the way to go if we want to be serious about handling our backlog of infrastructure projects. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. And I see no other comments, so I was going to start with 2 straw polls. The first one will be, do we want to add culture to the title of the tax? I will propose just arbitrarily that it be, the straw poll be on community culture, resilience, and safety tax. So if I could get, Junie, would you like to say something before I take a straw poll?
Yes, for the percentage wise.
We'll get there in a moment. I was going to do culture first and then percentage second, if that's okay.
Please do. I'd like to make a comment before you do that.
Okay, so the proposal I put out there, we'll take a straw poll on, is community culture, resilience, and safety tax. So if you'd raise your hand, if that's okay with you, if we make that change, I'll count hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we have plenty there. So staff, I think you've got direction. If we could change that tax title, the community culture, resilience, and safety tax. That's the first part. We'll then move to the percentage set aside for nonprofits. And Junie, what would you like to share with us?
Yeah, I want to be, I'm very optimistic about the poll that you're about to do, but I also, based on the conversation that we had last week, I also want to be a pragmatist. So today, as you're doing the poll, I wonder if you could do maybe 20%, 15%, and 12%. So maybe if we do get 20% out of everyone, we get a majority, then we don't have to go to the lower end. But I just don't want it to be where we just take one poll and then it's over.
Of course, I was thinking of starting with, do we want more than 10%? But if you'd like, we can start it the other way. I'd be happy to do that. Let's go 20, 15, 12, and 10. If we get a majority for any of those, then we can move ahead with it. Okay, so council members, raise your hand if you would like 20% of this tax to be allocated to nonprofits. I see 3. Okay. Council members, raise your hand if you'd like 15%. I see 3 hands. Very good. Council members, raise your hand if you'd like 12%. I see 4 hands. And so I'm going to say then that we are at 10%. So if anyone would like to suggest a different way of doing the polling, I think we have a majority of 5 who'd like to keep it at 10%. Okay, with that, I'll turn to staff. Did you get everything that you needed from us tonight?
We did, thank you.
And I will go ahead and we need to do a vote and I will, oh, I'm sorry. We'll move to a vote shortly. Bob, you got something?
I was just gonna make a motion.
Okay, please do.
I've now lost my materials. Hold on a second. That was a little bit too quick. I'm going to do both of them at the same time, if that's okay with everyone. I move that we adopt on first reading ordinance 8476 and ordinance 8487.
Is there a second?
Yes, there is.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Alicia, I'll get you in a second. Aaron, Alicia, we'll do a roll call as soon as Aaron is finished, if you're ready. Aaron?
Yeah, Bob, do you want to amend that to include the revised title of the text?
I'm sorry, yes, with the revision for 8476, that it include the word culture in the name of the text. Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, very good. Staff, I think, has that. So, Alicia, I think we're ready for a roll call.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, everyone. Councilmember Wallach.
Aye.
Weaver.
Aye.
Yates.
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Brockett.
Aye.
Friend.
Yes.
Joseph.
Aye.
Nagel.
Aye.
Swetlick.
Yes.
Mayor, ordinances 8476 as amended and 8487 are approved to be introduced and published by title only.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we're ready for the next item.
All righty. Next is item 4B, the introduction, first reading, public hearing, and consideration of a motion to order published by title only, ordinance 8486, submitting to the registered electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, the question of amending section 46 of the Boulder Home Rule Charter relating to the number of signatures of registered electors required on a referendum petition and conforming to amendments made to section 44 in 2018, setting forth the ballot title, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures, and setting forth related details.
And with that, I'd like to present my good friend Kathy Haddock, who's going to do the presentation.
Thank you, Sandra. This started out as a simple change, we thought, and has become a little bit more complicated. So I will try to present it in a way that makes it not as complicated. I can assure you that we've done a lot in the office to try to figure out and make sure that we've got it right. And thank you for the teamwork and the CAO, and particularly Sandra, in putting this together. And thanks, Emily, for doing the slides. So this charter amendment started kind of towards the end of the cycle. It wasn't part of our original planning because a good catch by a citizen that we have not, and I'm still on slide 1, that we had not made conforming amendments to section 46 when the changes were made to the charter in 2018. And those were to reduce the number of signatures that were required for initiative, referendum, and recall. So that's where the ordinance started, with that recognizing that working group. In 2018, we didn't make those changes. There then was a flurry of emails about how we should have made the revisions, and they centered around where the words registered electors should be placed and how it modified things. We realized that it was placed in a different place in each section 38A, 44, and 46. So the proposal before you tonight is amendments to all 3 of those. Our intent is to try to make the language as clear as possible, not add additional words. So there, I'm going to start, and we'll go to slide 2 now. Thanks, Emily, with the process for reviewing signatures on petitions. When the clerk reviews petitions, the petitions that come in with the signatures, she first eliminates all signatures on petitions that are not from registered electors of the city. Then she counts to see how many valid signatures there are. Then she needs to figure out how many signatures there need to be for it to be a sufficient petition. The clerk reviews the county election count from the previous 2 municipal candidate elections to determine how many signatures are required and averages those. The reports from the county clerk only include those votes that were counted. They don't include people that tried to vote that weren't registered, or they weren't qualified to register, or there was something else wrong with their ballot. So when we are at this stage, neither the county clerk or the city clerk is trying to figure out how many voters that voted in 2 years before or 4 years before were registered electors. They're just looking at the number of voters that there were for candidate elections in Boulder. And that's because challenges to election have to be timely. They are not open forever. It is presumed that if nobody challenges within 10 days of election, all the people that voted were valid electors and entitled to vote, and that's not changed. So going to slide 3, the first amendment we have is to section 38. And as you can see in this one, the qualifying language of registered electors is removed when referred to the counting of those who voted in the previous 2 candidate elections. And that leaves the qualifying language of registered elector remains for the requirement of those that have to sign the referendum petition, the initiative petition, or the recall petition. Slide 4, please. This is the amendments to section 44. It gets to the same place, but for this one, we had to add the qualification of registered electors of the city for the signature part and take it out when referring to the voters for the 2 years and 4 years prior to the initiative petitions. Slide 5, please. This removes the qualifier of registered electors when referring to those who voted in the previous 2 candidate elections. And then slide 6 is the ballot question itself. We had the underlying shows what we changed from what's in the packet, or at least the packet that was presented last week. You should have received today the corrected packet and ordinance. And this has the ballot question referring to the changes in 38A, 44, and 46. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm not seeing any council questions. I will pull up our public hearing. Okay, give me just a moment. I think we're going to be ready to move to that in a second. Just want to make sure I have the right list up here. Give me just 1 second. I do have it. So we have 2 speakers tonight, Lynn Siegel and Margaret Lecomte. Because we have 2, each will get 3 minutes to speak. And with that, Lynn, you got 3 minutes to speak on amending section 46 of the Boulder Charter.
Well, I'm real ashamed of you going to 12% instead of 20. Hello. But to be quite honest, I'm not informed about this, so I'm not going to speak. I waive my time. Bye.
Thank you, Lynn. And with that, we have Margaret Lecomte. And I see in chat, we don't see Margaret here. Margaret, with that, we are going to close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussions or motion. Aaron.
Well, I want to appreciate staff for coming up with a good solution for this problem. So we did get an email, pointing out some issues with the previous version, and appreciate your attention to this. And so I'm happy to go ahead and put a motion on the table. I'll move that we adopt ordinance 8486. And specifically the version that was posted on Hotline earlier today.
Thank you, Aaron. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Aaron, you want to speak to your motion?
Well, this is just a cleanup provision. So, we were doing some really complicated charter changes back a handful of years ago. And so there was a flaw in what was done, and this corrects that flaw. And this updated version takes it all the way to making sure that all these different charter provisions are consistent. So it seems like a good thing to put in front of the voters, get cleaned up.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Any other council comments? Very good. Seeing none, Alicia, you want to take us through a roll call?
All right, thank you, sir. Mayor Weaver,
Aye.
Councilmember Yates,
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Brockett,
Aye.
Friend,
Yes.
Joseph,
Aye.
Nagel,
Aye.
Swetlick,
Yes.
and Wallach.
Aye.
Sir, item 4B, ordinance 8486 is hereby approved to be introduced and published by title only.
Thank you, Alicia. And then I think we're ready to move on to the next item.
All right. Next, we have item 4C, which is a second reading and motion to adopt ordinance 8477, submitting to the electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November the 2nd, 2021. The question of amending section 7 of the Boulder City Charter relating to council compensation by requiring the council compensation be paid in equal amounts throughout the year to be paid on the same schedule as other city employees, setting forth the ballot title, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures, and setting forth related details. And second reading and motion to adopt ordinance 8478, submitting to the electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November the 2nd, 2021. The question of amending section 9 of the Boulder City Charter relating to council meetings by making explicit council's authority to create committees and limiting the size of committees to less than a quorum, setting forth the ballot title, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures, and setting forth related details.
And Kathy Haddock will also be presenting on item 4C. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Emily, for doing the slides. And for this one, we are ready for slide 2. In ordinance 8477, section 7 shows the changes to the code to even out the payments for council members without increasing the pay. And Emily, there you go. The reason for the highlighting in this is that when we were researching the candidate elections before, we realized that ordinance 8420 passed by the voters last year for ranked choice voting was not codified. So in this slide, we are showing the changes that the voters approved last year that were not in your packet form. So last year, the voters amended section 7 to say council members and the mayor. We're not making any change to that part. But then when we get down to the highlighted part below, we have to address the fact that there will be a mayor elected in November of 2023 that also has the opportunity to do this same election. So that language is added so that the mayor can make the election for the person elected in 2023 and thereafter. And otherwise, this the amendment to section 7 in 8477 is the same as what's in your packet.
Good.
Slide. Whoops.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Slide 3 is the ballot question itself, which adds also the language for so we're addressing the mayor elected in November of 2023. And then slide 4 is ordinance 8478. This one does not have any changes from what's in your packet. This shows the language. I didn't print out everything before that was changed. The first few paragraphs are not changed. Obsolete language is deleted. And then the change is underlined on this slide to make it clear that council has the authority to appoint council committees. They generally consist of no more than 2 council members, and in no event shall be greater than a quorum. Other council members can attend council committees, but shall not participate. And then it changes from may to shall, the requirement to appoint a council committee when screening applications for city manager, city attorney, or municipal court. And this was also recommended by the council charter committee. And slide 5 is the ballot question for ordinance 8478. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Kathy, I have a question. If you can go back 1 slide to the previous slide. My question is, we often have a standing evaluation subcommittee that gets appointed, and then as needed, we appoint subcommittees for looking for city manager, city attorney, or municipal court judge. Is there anything in the language that you proposed that requires it to be a single subcommittee to do that list of things, or is it okay to appoint a separate subcommittee for each one of those different things?
You can appoint a separate subcommittee for each one of those things. The first sentence that we add is to specifically give council the authority to appoint council committees. So in addition to the one you're required to appoint, you can appoint as many as you want.
Okay, because it just, okay, if you think that that's good and clear that we can do separate committees for each of those city manager, city attorney, municipal court judge, and evaluation, then I'm good with that. Okay. Any other questions, council members? Okay, seeing none, we can go to the public hearing. We have 1 person signed up for the public hearing on this. That's Lynn Siegel. Lynn, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you can do this, but I think that with the population growing the way it is in Boulder, with all this development, you need to do something that's more representative as far as choosing the committees and as far as choosing the city manager and the city attorney and such. And I don't see you improving the representation by increasing the population this much with CU South and with all those developments that I bark to you about every single week. That's reducing my democracy. It's reducing everyone's representation in the city of Boulder by increasing the population phenomenally like you are, encouraging it, driving it on, egging it on with CU South. If you're going to ask me to revise the city charter this way, and I'm going to agree to it on a ballot measure, then you better increase my representation by decreasing the population. And that's the opposite of what you're doing. Done.
Thank you, Lynn. And with that, we'll bring the public hearing to a close and return to council for discussion, questions, or a motion. Mary, you're on mute.
We received a suggestion that moved the sentence "and under no circumstances be a quorum." I forget exactly. If you could put up that slide.
And Emily, I believe that's slide 3 of the last one. No, slide 4, I think.
Right there. A suggestion that move Other council members may attend any council committee meeting to observe, but shall not participate ahead of, and in no such event be equal or greater than a quorum of council. So the intent, I don't remember what the exact movement of the sentence was, but the intent was that the subcommittee itself can be no greater, shall be equal, in no event be equal or greater than a quorum. And then that the council members attending cannot total be equal or greater than a quorum. So I guess I have to look up that email to tell you what that language was. But does somebody have that email handy?
I do. I believe what it says is that it added a sentence to the end. After other council members may attend any council meeting to observe but shall not participate, there was an additional sentence added that read, in no event shall the number of council members attending a committee meeting be equal or greater than a quorum of council.
Right, and I just wanted to, that suggestion made sense to me. And I wanted to just ask my colleagues what they think of that suggestion.
Thanks, Mary. I see Bob, and then I have a thought as well.
Yeah, I'll respond, Mary. Thanks for raising that up as an issue. I'm not exactly sure how it would work, number one, because I don't know if it's a first come, first serve. I guess a quorum is 5. And so we had a committee of 2 and 2 people showed up and then a third person showed up. I guess it's like first come, first serve. And then it's even more complicated with committee meetings, at least for the time being, occurring on Zoom. I don't know how somebody simply observing but not speaking has an undue influence on the two council members who are actually engaged in the committee. So I did give some careful thought to that suggestion, but I'm just not sure how it would work or whether it's even necessary. That's my thought.
And I guess I'll follow up, Mary, and I also understand the intent of what you're suggesting, but I don't see the risk here because I don't believe that even a quorum of council members could just call a meeting without some kind of public notice. So I'm thinking that there wouldn't be a way for this to turn into a meeting if a subcommittee meeting is called and the 2 appointed members are there and then observers are there. I don't think that a meeting could be called. I guess I'd turn to Sandra and ask about that. If you had a quorum of council members any place, not just a subcommittee meeting, but any place, they couldn't just call a council meeting, right? There would have to be some kind of notice.
I think that it would depend on whether there was council business being discussed at the meeting. Generally speaking, we take a conservative approach and do notice public meetings, but there would actually have to be action and work being done related to the business of government, because if you can imagine, we have social events where we have more than a quorum, or we have a quorum, I should say, of council members, and we don't notice those meetings.
Okay. Mary, would it be helpful to you if there were a sentence in here that said something along the lines of no other council business may be taken up at these council committee meetings?
Or something, yeah, that would be helpful. Or something that says that any council business shall be brought forward to the full council, or something like that. What I'm thinking is similar to like when we were having executive sessions where we would have all this discussion and then any kind of official vote, any official decision was brought to a council meeting. So in a manner where nothing can be conducted no decision can be made unless it's brought forward to the full council at a business meeting or a special meeting, something like that.
Aaron. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Sandra. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to allow Kathy, if there's anything that she would like to add. She's an expert on Quora and open records, or open meetings, I should say. Go ahead, Kathy, if there's anything that you want to add.
And I'm trying to make sure I understand the problem that potentially we're trying to fix. So council committees are open to the public. So those meetings are open to the public. You take minutes and you take records, so notice is required. If you're concerned that that committee would talk about matters beyond the scope of the authority that's been given to the committee by council, we could address the problem that way. If the concern is that meetings, that council members may get together and discuss items that aren't on an agenda, contrary to your open meetings requirements, there might be a different way to address it. So is the concern that when several council members get together, that they're going to talk about something beyond what the meeting is called for? And is that what we're trying to fix?
That's a question to Mary.
Yes.
Well, do you mind if I chime in?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Please do, Aaron.
Yeah, because I mean, I read that email as well, and my understanding of it was more that it was concerned that if you had multiple additional council members, they might be making hand signals or like gestures, or kind of participating in subtle ways, so as to in influence and with the majority of council, and which is a concern that I don't really share. Occasionally somebody will sit in on CAC and you get up to, now you're 4 council members and they're always quiet. Nobody says anything, and the language specifically says any additional members shall not participate. And so if they were making little signals or something, that would be a form of participation and would be not allowed. So if 2 council members showed up at CAC and listened, I don't think that's a problem. So I think I would go with the language as currently proposed.
I'll drop it. I don't hear my colleagues having any similar concerns, and others have given it a lot more consideration. So I will go with the proposed language.
Okay, super. And then I think we're still looking for a motion.
I'll move.
Mary.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the motion. If somebody would bring it up.
You're looking for the slide?
For the slide with the motion on it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not do a separate slide with the motion.
Okay, that's okay. I'll find it in the packet.
And I can read it for you, Mary, if you'd like.
And I will move what Sandra reads.
Okay. Motion to adopt ordinance 8477, submitting to the electors of the city of Boulder at the general municipal coordinated election to be held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, the question of amending section 7 of the Boulder Home Rule Charter relating to council compensation by requiring that council compensation be paid in equal amounts throughout the year to be paid on the same schedule as other city employees, setting forth the ballot title, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures, and setting forth related details. Did you want me to go ahead and read the second one as well?
I found it. I can read it.
Okay.
And second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt ordinance 8478, submitting to the electors of the City of Boulder at the General Municipal Coordinated Election to be held on Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, the question of amending Section 9 of the Boulder Home Rule Charter relating to council meetings by removing provisions that expired on December 31st, 2017, explicitly allowing to appoint council members generally containing 2 council members and in no event a number equal to or exceeding a quorum of council, allowing council members not appointed to attend but participate in council committee meetings, requiring council to appoint a recruitment committee for the 3 council appointments, setting forth the ballot title, specifying the form of the ballot and other election procedures, and setting forth related details.
Second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. Alicia, if you could take us through a roll call, that would be great.
All right, thank you, sir. Councilmember Yates.
Yes.
Young,
Yes.
Brockett,
Aye.
Friend,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Nagel,
Aye.
Swetlick,
Yes.
Wallach,
Aye.
and Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor, ordinances 8477 and 8478 are hereby adopted.
Excellent.
And I'd like to jump in and just say, and Kathy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is second reading. And so I believe we had changes during this version, for this version. So it will need to go to third reading on consent on August 17th.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so they're not adopted.
So may I ask, Sandra, what changes did we make? Were there, so I thought we went ahead with it as proposed. Did we make changes?
We did not make changes to 8478. We did make changes to 8477. And this is where you guys will have to help me with the council procedure. I believe that by correcting the packet before the meeting with what you received for 8477 before this meeting, that means we do not have to go to third reading on these 2. Is that correct?
So Aaron, you've got a hand up.
Well, it was done before the meeting, but the text that we just adopted was different from the first reading text. And it was substantive, right, to include the mayor in the text. So that strikes me as something that would require a third reading.
Okay.
Okay, so to follow through on this, it sounds like we need to go to third reading on 8477, but I do not believe we need to go to third reading on 8478.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, super. That's great. Thank you for the clarification, Tendra.
You bet.
All right, sir. Just so I'm clear, we will move 8477 to a third reading, therefore it's not adopted, and we will go ahead and proceed with the adoption of 8478. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, our next item, sir, if we're ready to move on.
Yes.
Is item number 5, matters from the city manager. 5A is the People's Crossing and land acknowledgement update.
Thanks, Alicia. And sort of as the city continues to lean in and uplift racial equity and social justice issues, staff has been working hard on the land acknowledgement update. And we have Dan Burke and Phil Yates, I believe, to talk a little bit more about that.
Great, thank you, Nuria. Good evening, Council. Dan Burke, Director of the city's Open Space and Mountain Parks Department. And I will be joined by Phil and Clay Fong in just a bit. And there's some other staff that are on the line if there's questions. This is an update to inform you of the progress that we're making on 2 efforts by the city that is designed to strengthen our relationships with American Indian tribal nations who we regularly consult with, as well as Indigenous peoples in our community. Just to remind council and the community, this is actually our fourth touch together with staff and council on these issues. On April 6th, we gathered together at a council meeting and had a preparation session with Ernest House in order to prepare for the tribal consultation that was then held on April 7th, in which a number of council members participated in. It was a very successful tribal consultation, full day on April 7th. We made a lot of progress on issues that we've been discussing over the past several years, in which the name change of Settlers Park to the People's Crossing was one of them, and that's one of our updates to you tonight. And then on June 1st, I was joined by Phil Yates, who helped us sort of take the last step, if you will, in formally changing the name of Settlers Park to the People's Crossing. And we had a good discussion with council on June 1st. So this is our fourth time together on these issues. And with that, I am going to turn things over to our communication specialist of the city of Boulder, Phil Yates, to update you on the People's Crossing name change, as well as the land acknowledgement. So Phil.
All right, thank you, Dan. Good evening, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to give you these updates tonight. I just also want to take a moment to thank all the staff from several departments who've been cooperating and working on these two projects. Also want to thank Emily and Alicia for their assistance tonight. Next slide. Or actually, next slide. So yeah, first we'll start with just an update on the People's Crossing. Next slide. Before we start again with the presentation and get deep into it, I think it's important to look back about the meaning behind the People's Crossing. This was conversations. The name came from two consultations we had with tribal representatives, and the meaning behind the name is that Boulder and the Settlers Park area, formerly the Settlers Park area, have been a crossroads for Indigenous people who've traversed and lived in the area in the mountains and plains of Boulder since time immemorial. That the people and our people are English translations for how many American Indian tribal nations refer to themselves in their native languages, and that the usage of the term the people is meant to be inclusive of people who have traveled through and lived in the Boulder area. Next slide. Well, since the name change was adopted, open space and mountain parks we've updated the interactive trail map. We've created a new trailhead page on the new city website with an alert actually describing the the process for how we've came to this important community development. We've installed temporary signs in the area just to inform visitors of the name change, and the sign actually has QR codes and bit.ly codes that will link to the project webpage that provides more information about the process and the meaning behind the name. Next slide. By late September, we anticipate installing a trailhead ID sign. That will be installed at the People's Crossing parking lot. There's going to be a trailhead kiosk just north of Farmer's Ditch. That's the secondary kiosk. There will be trail map signs updated with the new name at the People's Crossing, the Chautauqua Trailhead, Panorama Point, the Halfway House, Realization Point, and the Centennial Trailheads. In addition to that, we anticipate putting additional wayfinding signs with the new name in the area. Next slide. Once we've installed that infrastructure, we anticipate distributing additional community communications just to remind community members of the name change and to announce the installation of new sign infrastructure. So that will be communications through a press release, next door, social media, and emails. And then as a part of this work, we are also planning an October community event to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution in Boulder and the People's Crossing renaming effort. Along with that, we are also planning an event with tribal representatives for the March consultation next year. And Clay Fong is here to answer questions about Indigenous Peoples Day events this year. Next slide. So right now we're focusing and inviting tribal representatives to participate in a city tribal working group that we agreed to at the 2021 consultation in April. What the first goal of that working group and the primary focus of that working group is to help us develop long-term interpretive panels in the area to remind, to talk about the Indigenous presence on the land and just to provide additional knowledge for how we can develop probably additional signage across the system, but primarily focused on the area. We're also, as a part of that, and speaking with other departments, we are talking with other staff about the Settlers Park inscription that is on the underpass. It's a part of the pathway that will take you to from Eben G. Fine north to the People's Crossing. And what we're doing is we're talking with transportation mobility, transportation and mobility, public works, and parks and recreation, again, about the long-term future of that inscription. But we're also planning to speak with the city tribal working group to gather their ideas about what to do with the inscription. Next slide. Yeah, now I'd like to provide an update about the city's work to develop a land acknowledgement. Next slide. So since early 2021, we've been focusing and working on developing a formal land acknowledgement. Through this effort, it's included, we've had several lessons from the community and American Indian tribal nations. And as a part of this work, we've really kind of honed in on 4 key purposes for this effort. And the first is to use the statement to educate the community and honor Indigenous people who have traversed, lived in, and stewarded lands in the area since time immemorial. Reckon honestly with a legacy of American European colonization of Indigenous lands and a history of removal policies that violated human rights and broke government treaties. We want to use the land acknowledgement to inspire community education, reflection, and action for Indigenous community members and American Indian tribal nations. And finally, we want to take additional steps to fulfill the Indigenous Peoples' Day resolution and our racial equity plan. Next slide. So we've taken several steps as a part of this process, but first we really want to extend our gratitude to community members who developed the Indigenous Peoples' Day resolution, and staff has based the land acknowledgement work on their hard efforts. With the resolution serving as a foundation for a city land acknowledgement, we've taken several steps through this process. We've spoken to the Human Relations Commission on February 20th. We conducted community engagement for about 3 weeks. During that time, we received community input on themes and ideas not in the Indigenous Peoples' Day resolution that could be included in the land acknowledgement. We then provided an update to Boulder City Council on April 6th. And then we presented, with all that input, we presented a preliminary draft to tribal representatives. And we stressed that it was just a starting point and that the city was open to receiving feedback. Since tribal consultation, we're continuing to receive comments on the land acknowledgement this summer. And it's important to note that tribal representatives are quite busy this summer with consultations and ceremonies and community events. So we're expecting feedback to keep coming through this summer. And we're here tonight to give you an update about all this ongoing work. Next slide. And so the collective input we've received through these several steps have led to content that is currently in the draft acknowledgement that we're still receiving feedback on. And so the first theme was we really wanted to base the acknowledgement, like I said before, on the city's Indigenous Peoples' Day resolution. We want to acknowledge Indigenous peoples who've lived in, traversed, and stewarded lands in the Boulder Valley since time immemorial. We want to recognize tribal nations that have agreements with the city of Boulder and have historical connections to Colorado and consult with city and staff. We want to honor Indigenous people with their own names and in their own languages. We want to recognize that knowledge shared over countless generations has shaped enduring cultural and spiritual connections with the land and natural ecosystems. Next slide. We also want to stress traditions, oral histories, and languages still connect tribal nations and Indigenous people with the area. We want to refute past justifications for the colonization of indigenous lands. And as a part of this acknowledgement, we also want to identify specific ways the acknowledgement can initiate meaningful action for indigenous community members and American Indian tribal nations, and create an acknowledgement that can adapt with time, incorporate new knowledge and histories, and meet changing community needs. Next slide. But we recognize, excuse me, that we need to take action beyond words. Currently, we're developing ways to use the acknowledgement to inspire purposeful reflection and action for Indigenous community members and American Indian tribal nations when we begin new projects, we start long-term community plans, we recruit and retain staff, we develop work plans that guide our day-to-day work, and when we plan city council and board and commission meetings, and while we're also conducting council, board, and commission meetings. So definitely taking the words and trying to take that into action. Next slide. And so here's just some examples. First is that we just plan to develop several versions of the land acknowledgement. That will include a full version and shorter examples in order just to accommodate the different formats that it might be needed in. Those formats could include the web, which would have the full version, background, and additional information, signs, email signatures, and other content. So definitely trying to think about the different ways that we can use this to help educate and communicate the Indigenous presence on the land since time immemorial. Next slide. Another possible example is for a slide for community members, boards and commissions, and council to reflect on before the meetings occur. This could provide an opportunity to tie the land acknowledgement to meeting agenda items and really help prevent rote recitation of the acknowledgement without meaningful reflection. So this is one other idea. Next slide. But we still have several steps ahead of us as we continue with this project. Like I said before, we're still continuing to incorporate tribal nation feedback. Like we said, they consult with a lot of different agencies across the country, and that they're busy this summer, and that we might not be able to receive some additional feedback through the fall. We're also planning to refine how we can use a land acknowledgement to initiate meaningful action. We anticipate consulting staff agenda meeting members to hear additional feedback and input for how we can use the land acknowledgement. And as agreed to at the 2021 consultation, we're inviting tribal representatives to participate in a city tribal working group. That working group is expected to maybe meet sometime later this summer or early fall, and as agreed to at the consultation, to help us finalize the city's planned land acknowledgement. One thing that we're really focused on and are interested in is really trying to, I may have skipped somewhere, is really try to include original Indigenous names and their meanings in the acknowledgement. We're also trying to see if we can create a pronunciation guide that can help community members pronounce Indigenous names, but that's certainly pending resources and other barriers. So as we look ahead, a lot of steps still left to do, and we're anticipating a council update in fall, winter of 2021. But looking back on what we had spoken back in April, it could take additional time, and finalizing this could occur over 2 consultations. So with that, next slide, open to questions about all this ongoing work.
Thank you so much, Dan and Philip, for the presentation. Council, do we have any questions? Mary.
Thank you for all of this fine work. It's really wonderful to be in this place after 6 years since the resolution passed. My question has to do with the sign that is the plaque that commemorates Ray and Eunice Cornell.
Yep.
That includes the phrase Settlers Park.
Yes.
So it says that the city doesn't have jurisdiction to change it. But the city could, in good faith, the city or a council member, say, could approach whoever has jurisdiction over it to ask for cooperation in friendly cooperation, collaboration to change the sign. Is that a possibility?
I think that's definitely the case. I mean, it just is not located on our property, and I think it's the personal property of someone else. So I think, yeah, it would take additional investigation and communication with their family to speak with them and understand how they want to approach that thing moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, actually, while I have the floor, I have another question about, now, this one is about the land acknowledgement.
Yeah.
You had the slide where it says potential places in which it could be used.
Yep.
And in it, it included like planning for council meetings and planning for boards and commissions meetings. I'm not envisioning exactly how it would be used in the planning of a council meeting.
Right.
So the planning of a council meeting to me is like CAC. So yeah, could you just elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Yeah, so the idea was more of just to reflect on it when important items that affect community members, indigenous community members, and tribal nations, just to reflect on that when actually putting agendas together. That was kind of the initial idea. Amy, are you here? She could maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so actually, Phil, you were right on the right track. When we're like looking at putting together what an agenda might look like and ensuring that we've got this acknowledgement in our minds with any decisions that will be made moving forward. So I could see it happening at a CAC meeting, depending on what's kind of coming down the pike on the work plan. But yeah, I think for the most part, it would be at the beginning of a meeting that would be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help answer your question, Mary?
Well, I'll ask. So the intent then would be basically to, it's basically a way of embedding our actions through the reflection of the land acknowledgement prior to beginning a project or,
right.
Yeah, got it.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Much more eloquently put.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true.
Thank you. I get it now.
Thank you. Yeah, the intention is really to ensure that it's not just some rote thing that's being stated before any type of board, commission, or council meeting, or even a city training, being sure that we're really being intentional, because that can happen. And we've seen it happen in other jurisdictions, and we want to ensure that we're not doing that.
Great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Very good. Council, any other thoughts, any feedback for the team, anything? Very good. I will jump in and say it is great to see this progress occurring on the renaming of the People's Crossing. It is also really heartening to see those signs going up and so on. I want to say that I recall from some of the consultations, there was discussion about a naming ceremony and how the different tribes would look at doing that, maybe a little bit differently from each other. So I think it's well worth thinking about how to do that acknowledgement, a public acknowledgement that the park name is now the People's Crossing, and that it has been done in collaboration with the tribes. So I think that's an important piece of this. And I guess also, I just want to appreciate how much thought is going into the land acknowledgement, because I do see a lot of rote kind of recitations of words with, I think, a lot of lack of connection. And I think doing it at the right times and in the right ways and for the right purpose can kind of prevent that from happening. So I guess I'll say one last thing. My experience with decision-making in these consultations has been that it's extremely deliberate and careful. And then once it's arrived at, it tends to carry forward for a long time. So I think the time invested in this, it may seem like it's moving slowly, but that's kind of purposeful, I think. And we should resist any temptation to be impatient or rush things. I think the pace it's been going has shown that we've been arriving at some really important milestones along the way. So I want to thank everyone involved, particularly the tribes that have been part of the consultations in getting us here.
Absolutely.
So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Alicia, what do we have next?
I got it. All right, sir. Next, we have item number 7, matters from the mayor and members of council. 7A is the in-person council meeting discussion.
Excellent. And Nuria, do you want to help lead us through that?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So I guess a couple of things I'll say as we set off the conversation, right? One is we had originally planned to have you all come back after the July break and come back to council in person. We had some technology issues we wanted to work out just to make sure that we could do that in a way that was still taking testimony in a hybrid approach, as we are not anticipating opening the Muni building to the public until the fall. We have worked out and gotten the equipment in place, and so we are now ready when council would like to come back to have meetings in chambers. But since those initial discussions, cases have certainly been on the rise. We have seen a change and trends sort of veering in the wrong direction with COVID, particularly with the variant. We've had multiple conversations with staff as this has been going on. Certainly, I've had conversations with some of council members as well in the past. And we've been keeping and tracking what the CDC is telling us and monitoring to what our regional partners are doing as well. I'll say that my position on coming back into chambers and coming back even in the fall as we transition back has evolved as we have seen some of these changes in the COVID variant rise. I know that we are going to have a meeting on this topic with the county on August 17th. But thanks to staff and James Brown and Pam Davis in particular, who put some numbers together. What I'll say is that we have seen in the past 2 or 3 weeks, and this is one of the things that has really made me reconsider where we are. In the past 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen about 25 employees been exposed to COVID-19. Some of those have been breakthrough cases. I want to emphasize that not every staff member has tested positive, but as we were being alerted to that, what we realized is that a lot of staff members who had been exposed and were being then tested were in fact folks that have been unvaccinated to date yet. We've also seen our 7-day rolling average in the county is about 39.4 cases per day. This in comparison, just last week, the highest average was 25.1. So we ourselves here in the county are seeing increases in cases as we move forward. We understand that 95% of those cases in Colorado are now Delta variant. So with all of that, I will say that I have shared with staff last Friday an email saying that we are, and I'll say too, to honor staff as well, not only have we heard concerns from council and from community, but staff members have also been sharing as we have been having town halls and they're talking to their directors. We've been having increasing anxiety from staff about coming to work. So we have been, again, thinking about what do we need to do to make sure we're augmenting our safety precautions as clearly as we can. As all this has been going on, I'll say that I had a fellow council member in another city said something that resonated with me. And that really was that we owe it to ourselves, to community, and by community, I also mean our staff folks, that they should not be worried about whether a city person helping them, from first responders to those providing customer service, is placing them at risk. In those moments when you're vulnerable and needing assistance, you're not really thinking about, is the person that's helping me vaccinated or not, because they are or not wearing a mask. So over time, I think we have evolved, and we are now in a place where we have shared with staff that we are soon to be issuing new guidelines concerning masking mandates. And certainly we are waiting and continuing to partner with our Boulder County counterparts in conformance to what CDC is bringing forth. But we're also moving to figure out how do we have staff report their vaccination status and allow a compromise for those that cannot get vaccinated either by choice or by religious objections or for medical reasons. And we know that that's there. What steps do we need to put in place so that then if they are unable to get vaccinated, what reasonable accommodations can we find? Or frankly, what other measures we may do, which may be to issue that they have to wear a mask anytime they are in a public facility. So I share that to say that we are moving in a direction to increase our safety, both to our public and to our staff and to you. And that we are hoping to hear from you about the ways in which you want to come back and ways you are thinking about coming back into our public facilities and into in-person meetings as we move forward.
Thank you, Nuria. Council, I think the question before us really is, what do we want to do as far as coming back in person? There's a much broader conversation to be had about COVID and city policy. I believe we're teed up to have that conversation on August 17th. And so tonight, the question before us really is, do we want to even try and establish a date when we want to meet in person? I think it's kind of open forum to weigh in on what we're thinking about that. There will be a more fulsome discussion of the entire set of numbers and kind of a big picture city organizational directions, but I don't think we need to touch on all of that tonight. Tonight really is a more focused question to give direction to staff on, are we anticipating wanting to come back in 2 weeks, in a month? How do other council members want to look at this? I certainly have my opinions, but I'd love to hear from the rest of you before I go into that. So with that, I'm going to open the floor up and let's hear from you guys what your thoughts are. I see Mark and then Aaron. Mark?
Okay. Well, first, Nuria, thank you for that description of where we're headed. It certainly does not create a lot of confidence on my part for a very, very quick resumption of in-person meetings. I'm not sure we need to put a time on it so much as we need to be responsive to changing conditions. Since we're sort of headed south, I don't really know if we even want to have the conversation until we see, a dramatic improvement in infections and hospitalizations, et cetera. I would simply leave it open at the moment. I mean, if rather than keep moving the goalposts, I'd rather wait for a moment when we can establish the goalposts and hopefully make it. So that's simply my view on this. Besides that, my last comment is that I no longer think of people as three-dimensional, and I wouldn't want to be disappointed by showing up and seeing everybody in full. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Aaron and then Rachel. Aaron.
Yeah, I agree. I'd been looking forward to getting back to in person, but with trends moving in the wrong direction now does not seem the time. And I agree with Mark that we can take a wait and see position. I think that's perfectly fine. And then I know we're going to have a bigger conversation in 2 weeks, but Mary, I just appreciate that you're reevaluating the city's approach to masking and vaccination for city employees. So appreciate that. Sounds like it's moving in a good direction.
Thanks, Aaron. Rachel.
Yeah, thanks for this, Nuria. A couple things, you're asking for our feedback on when we return, if I understand it, like what would we like to see? And so I will say for my part, and I think this applies to everywhere in the city, not just chambers, but I would hope that it is kind of the trend that you're looking at. People who are vaccinated and have submitted proof of that or have been given a reasonable accommodation that is set out in advance for wearing a mask or something that protects them as well as everyone else who's there. And, in terms of everyone else who's there, I don't know at what point we're thinking about members of the public coming, but that's, you know, I guess like phase 2 or something of how we'll have to think through that. I think there are conversations happening nationally around vaccine passports and things like that. And I would think that, you know, if it's something optional and where you're going to be in a closed room with people for a while, I guess I personally would hope that we and members of the public are keeping each other safe, and same rules would apply. Either you're vaccinated or you're wearing a mask. And if you're wearing a mask and we don't know that people are vaccinated, then I think maybe we all have to wear masks. So that's a possible number, another level of it. And obviously with Delta, my understanding is that vaccinated people are passing it back and forth as well. So I think that until we know more about that, it doesn't make sense to go back at all, because this seems like a more optional thing to be in chambers. And along those lines, I'm glad that we're getting an update on the 17th, but that seems a little, you know, 2 weeks in COVID time is, you know, it can be exponential. So in terms of things like city and county mask mandates and what we're doing with staff, hopefully that's not waiting on us for 2 weeks to have those conversations or make those decisions. It seems like I wouldn't want to delay any important important progress. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Bob.
Yeah, I also want to acknowledge Nuria and her staff for the hard work they've done over the last week or so to evaluate this situation. As Rachel said, it's a very dynamic situation. It's changing from day to day, and I appreciate the open-mindedness and the flexibility that Nuria and her staff have demonstrated in this. I know you'll make the right decisions. With respect to the more narrow question about when council returns to chambers, I think we were all looking forward to getting back together a few weeks ago. We had a technical glitch that postponed things. The technical glitch is now gone, but we have another problem. And it just occurs to me that if we have a situation where community members are not going to be in chambers with us, and if we have some staff members who are concerned about being in chambers with each other or with us, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to get together in chambers. It's just the 9 of us, and we seem to be getting along just fine, as Mark says in 2D. And there's only really one more meeting that would have taken place in person before Labor Day, and that's the meeting 2 weeks from now on August 17th, which ironically is the meeting at which we're going to learn more about the variant, because we have a study session on the 10th of August and the 24th of August, which would have been online anyway. We have a 5th Tuesday off at the end of August, so it seems to me, I concur with my council colleagues, we should make the August 17th meeting virtual as well. We're going to learn more then. We're going to learn more for the rest of the month, and then as we approach the fall, we can make a kind of a meeting by meeting determination whether we feel comfortable getting back together, and more importantly, whether our staff feels comfortable rejoining us, and when we want to invite community members back into chambers. So I agree with Mark. I think this is a week by week, case by case basis, and I wouldn't put any artificial dates out there other than I would say let's do August 17 virtually.
Thanks, Bob. I've got Adam and Junie. Adam?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said, and I just don't think Mark could handle my third dimension anyway, so.
Junie?
Yeah, I do agree with the staying online until we have further guidance and examining further with the new variant that is coming, because again, it's evolving, and I think we definitely need more information to know what is the next step. So I think staying online for now is the best way to keep us safe and keep other people in the community safe as well. And I think I've mentioned this before, going into chamber is not for us, it's for the community. And if the community is not there, I wonder what's the value of sitting in that chair next to your name when really you participate in chamber so that you can be with community, and there would not be any community because, again, with everything that is constantly shifting and changing, we have to think, okay, do we also want to put community members in chamber and put perhaps their lives at risk? So staying online, I think, is the best way to go. As far as the vaccine passport, I mean, I watch the news all the time. I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, but I would say maybe the city should consider just following CDC guidelines and federal policies, because recently I think I've heard President Biden mentioning, for federal employees, maybe they will have those guidelines, whereas people have to carry, maybe have some type of a vaccine passport. I don't know, but from what I've seen watching the news, there's heated debate about that as well. Again, it's about keeping communities safe and doing the right things for community members. But again, we still have to ensure safety as well, also balancing, what people would call their freedom of choice. So as someone who's been vaccinated, I would say we still want to make people feel welcome, but also protect other community members from this, this deadly virus. Yeah, I think following CDC guidelines should be what we do in this community, as opposed to going on our own and figure things out.
Thank you, Junie. Mary.
Yeah, so the only thing I would have to add to everything that's been said is that if and when we come back, hopefully prior to the end of this term, it should be done in a manner that we aren't wearing masks at the dais. Because if we are wearing masks at the dais, I would think that that is way less transparent, no pun intended, than being in a Zoom call. So, so whatever we do, we should be there maskless, and if we can't do it that way, then there's really no point in doing it in 3D.
Great, thank you, Mary. And I'll just close up here. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I will say there's two purposes for this discussion. I figured it would probably land here. It's no surprise. We're all watching the news and going in the wrong direction. I think the reason that we would like to return is, as Junie says, for the community and for ourselves. I think we get a lot more out of meetings in person. We can see body language. We can understand, how people are trying to express themselves through, means other than just the 2D that we get here. However, Mary's exactly right. If we're going to be wearing masks, we shouldn't bother. And, it will be assigned to us and to the community when we can get together safely without masks in that room. And that would be the beginning point. It won't be the end point. We'll have to get our study sessions in person. We'll have to bring the public back to both council meetings and study sessions. So this is really setting the expectation that by and large, our community, like everyone else in the country, has seen a setback in the progress on COVID. The answer to this is vaccination. And the answer to this is making it as widely available as possible. I think there's going to be some very large societal forces that are going to come to bear on this. And as we have even higher levels of vaccine penetration, we may see a time when we can get back together in person. But I guess I'll say, I don't think that that's going to be well into September. That's just me looking into a crystal ball. We each have one. I'm guessing that it's going to be end of September before we're going to return to a conversation about when we might get together in person. But as Rachel says, 2 weeks in COVID time, who knows what's going to happen. We will touch on this next week. And I guess I'll finally say, for all of us and for the benefit of the community, our lodestar here really is Boulder County Public Health. I know that they're looking at this closely. They'll be with us in 2 weeks, and we can talk to them about, what our thoughts are on their actions. But I expect between now and 2 weeks from now, we may hear from Boulder County Public Health with some new guidance one way or the other. So we'll be paying attention to that. Thank you all for weighing in on this. I'm disappointed that we can't be together in person, but it is clearly in the best interest of public safety that we're not. So thanks very much for all of that. Nuria, did that cover everything?
It did indeed, and we'll keep you apprised of any new developments as they happened in this very strange COVID time that we keep.
Very good. Alicia, I believe we have one more item, correct?
That is correct, sir. Our last item is 7B, the review of proposed schedule for CU South annexation items.
Thank you, Alicia. And I'll just lay out what CAC has suggested. One thing I'll state right off the bat is that all decisions about the schedule on CU South will be adopted by all of council. So CAC is bringing suggestions. We took action on the first suggestion tonight by scheduling a special meeting for next week. At that special meeting next week, we'll consider two items. One will be the first reading of an annexation ordinance relative to CU South. And the other item is a resolution which is required by state law, which we establish a public hearing date on that annexation. And so what I expect we will see next week is a resolution which establishes September 14th as the meeting date for second reading of the annexation ordinance, provided it passes on first reading, and then we'll see first reading of the annexation ordinance itself. If those both pass, then we will have September 14th for the second reading public hearing, at which we'll have the staff presentation, the applicant presentation, council questions, and the public hearing. And the expectation for that special meeting on September 14th is it will take a while. And I think we anticipate continuing that meeting to the following week, September 21st, which is a regular city council meeting where we can have deliberations and any decision that council might choose to make. That is kind of the extent that's been planned out so far. If we do end up needing to go to third reading, a third reading would be able to be scheduled for October 5th. And that is kind of the schedule as it is so far. We have attempted to take into account Mirabai's schedule so that she will not be here, I believe, on September 14th, but is committed to watching the tape of that public hearing and presentations and council questions. And then on September 21st, I believe we will have a full council to be able to hear to be able to have a full council for deliberations, discussion, and any decision. So I just wanted to lay that out for everyone. I know it's a little complicated, but there are some state rules as well as our own council procedures. So I guess I'd turn it up to council. Any questions, feedback, thoughts, concerns? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Mary, sorry, Mary.
Yes, Sam, thank you for that. I'm wondering how the agreement works into the resolution and the ordinance.
There will be a copy of the agreement with the first reading, and I would then turn to Sandra and anyone else in the city attorney's office to go further than that. I know there will be a version with first reading, and that's about all I'm sure of right now. Sandra?
Yeah, Mary, thanks for the question. And if there are any folks, like Jacob or anybody else that wants to chime in, please feel free to do so. My understanding is that the agreement will be submitted with the resolution and ordinance on first reading on if council decides that, well, we have set a special meeting for August 10th, so that would be the date that the agreement would be attached.
Mary, does that get to your question?
Well, no, I guess what I'm wondering is the resolution is setting the date for the hearing, and that's per state law. The ordinance has to go through first reading, second reading, third reading. The agreement is another kind of animal. So the agreement is something that is essentially a document that is, I'll call it a living document, for lack of a better word, until some point in time. So how many versions of that agreement do we anticipate will happen up until the time of the second reading hearing? and possibly third reading. So will the agreement be evolving at that point in time? Are there certain places where we expect to release different versions? At what point does it stop evolving?
So there are changes that are going to be made along the way, and they can be made and updated at different points and up until the ordinance is actually adopted. And Phil and Jacob, feel free to jump in if I get anything wrong there.
No, that's correct. There will be some changes between first and second reading. We are able to hopefully, as council members may likely know, the planning board held a public hearing and then deliberation last Thursday and provided a number of recommendations that we are working on through the process. And so there will be an agreement for first reading. And then at this point, we don't have scheduled an interim release prior to the second reading. And so when council gets the packet with the ordinance for second reading with the agreement, it'll be released then towards the end of September or the end of August.
Okay, great. So what that says to me is that if folks have feedback, either council, community, or the negotiators on either side, CU or the city or the community, if anybody has changes, they have up until the deadline of the release of the packet for second reading.
Yes, ma'am. And I also would encourage that we do have a questionnaire on beheardboulder.org for those listening as well. That'll be active through August 13th.
And Phil, could you also mention the two public outreach dates that we have?
Absolutely. We have two listening sessions scheduled for August. One is on Monday, August 9 from 2:30 to 4:30. And the second one is Thursday, August 26th from 4:30 to 6:30. Those are 2-hour sessions. It'll start with a half-hour briefing Q&A by staff, followed by an hour and a half at a minimum of just listening to community members providing their feedback.
Okay. And Mark.
Just a quick question. Is it your intention to forward to us the recommendations of the planning board? I know they had quite a number of recommendations.
Yes.
Could we do that just for comparative purposes?
Mark, I'll just interpret that as a request to staff that that spreadsheet with those recommendations be sent out on hotline, if that's possible, once you've got them collected, because all council members will get it and then it will go out to the public as well.
No problem, Sam. We'll be happy to do that.
That's excellent. Thank you. And Mary, I think kind of circling back around to your question, we've got those two listening sessions in the Be Heard Boulder portal is also taking feedback on this. So, if we are having the hearing September 14th, sometime the first week in September, the packet will get locked down. So I think, there's the ability to take feedback and incorporate it per the teams working on it up until kind of the first week in September.
Great,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you for that.
All right. Any other points on the schedule for CU South? Great. As I said, and I'll remind us again, council will be voting on each of these things on August 10th. We'll be voting. When we vote on the resolution, that's going to establish that date, suggested to be September 14th. So everything about this process will be ratified by the full council. None of this schedule will be set by CAC, only suggestions brought forward to the full council. So with that, I believe we're at the end of our agenda. So we're in the debrief section. Any more feedback or input from council or staff? Awesome. Seeing none, I will gavel this meeting closed. Oh, sorry, Aaron, you just slipped in.
And just to note that National Night Out was it was a great event. Wonderful to see community members in person and see the members of our phenomenal police and fire department departments, as well as some open space rangers and others. So thanks to everyone who organized that.
Thank you, Aaron, for that. Much appreciated, everybody who worked on that. Aaron, before you and Mirabai got here, we did have some chit chat about that as well. So we all agree with you, I think. And with that, we'll gavel the meeting closed at 10:09. See you all soon. Bye-bye, Mavis.
Good night.
Thanks.